Good day, everyone. My name's Ryan. Together with Aaron, we are the RA21 podcast, a really adult show. Welcome back. So it's been a while, Aaron. How are you?
Oh my gosh, it's been a long month, like very long month. For me, things are looking actually pretty good for me. Like a lot of things went right this month, so I'm actually quite happy. I've been waking up very early these days and getting my day started in the right track. But definitely, I think today the issue is not me because I heard Ryan, you got COVID, right?
Yeah, that's right. I actually got COVID a couple of weeks back. But since then I've recovered. But it wasn't fun. Just put
Oh
it that way.
gosh. Yeah, guys. So if any of you have gotten COVID, hopefully you guys have recovered. I think Ryan, you are doing much better already, right?
Yeah, still coughing a little bit, but can't be helped. But aside from that, yeah, everything's just kind of like back to normal.
You see, this guy, he has recovered enough to even record a podcast.
Yeah, excuse me if I keep coughing today.
Yeah, but I think today we actually wanted to do this topic because I think it's a timely time to do this topic because we've been doing I think like the investment topics for the last 3 or 4 episodes, right? We've been really like focused on like debt, really focused on like investing. So I think it's a very good like a sideline that we decide to do something which is more towards the mindset and psychology in terms of like investing because I think that we titled this podcast a really adult show, right? And then sometimes I think it's important to go back to the learning process of the mental side of things which is why today the episode is all about abundance, right? So maybe I can start Ryan, why do you think it's like so important to have a right mindset when you do things in life?
I see this kind of like good and bad mindsets as kind of like compounding interest in a way, because like all these things, good or bad, they add up, and if you compound the wrong way, then you tend to go into like a downward spiral in your life, and it can be quite difficult. So you need to have like the right mindset to actually navigate life, and the right mindset will eventually reflect itself in all aspects of your life, like your career, your investment portfolio, even like the best like when I made the shift from like value to growth, right? I had this mindset shift which actually propelled me to do like a 10x on my net worth. So it was quite amazing to have the right mindset, which we'll talk about more about later. But in a sense, like yes, it's like compounding interest. So that's why like you need to have the right mindset to navigate life.
Yeah, I agree. When I was very young, right? God knows how many years ago, I don't know, many years. Sound like an old man now.
Yeah.
I guess like when I was like I think more than a decade ago, right? When I first like started reading like self-help books, right? I think one of the key books that really spoke to me, but it was a pretty tough book to read. It was called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill.
Oh, that's classic, right?
Yeah, that's a classic book, but because it's like such an old book, it's actually like quite difficult for me to read because the English that he used can be quite
it's
cheap,
a bit classic.
Then a bit too close, a bit too classic for that day reading to be honest. But I think he titled the book very well, and that is called Think and Grow Rich, right? He's basically split up like the 2 types of mentality in order for you to actually like do well in your life because the term do well and being rich, right, is a very subjective and subjective term, right, towards many different people. Being rich and doing well is very subjective, right? For a person, being rich doesn't always mean like need to be like super wealthy in terms of monetary value. A person can say that his riches can be his relationships, can be his career, so long as it rewards them in the output is happiness, right?
Yes.
So in order for you to get this type of output, right, I always feel that, after speaking to many people, over so many years, right, I realized that the most important thing that a person must have is a right mindset, right? Because that is where, right, the battle is won first. Because if you cannot even like think about, succeeding or think about being positive or having a favorable outcome, right, then honestly you're going into a battle, right, where the battle is really lost already. And that is something which I think is so important in, not as you mentioned, in investing, in your career, and of course in your relationships as well. Because if you go in with a mentality, right, that there's a potential to fail, right, then I don't think that is the right way to go about it, because end of the day, the output usually favors a person, right, who is very optimistic in life.
Yes.
Right. So I think that's why today we decided to do this episode, because I think it's quite a timely episode, right? Because the last few months, we have definitely seen a lot of pessimism, not just in markets, but I think as of late, I don't know, maybe is it just my feed, but I feel that quite a number of people have been suffering from burnout.
Yeah, burnout is one thing. Like, there's kind of like a career crisis going on because, like, after the Great Resignation, a lot of people are struggling to actually find work now. And then, like the economy slowed down a little, and then, people are not hiring as much. So yeah, it's a tough time for careers. It's also like a tough time for not just the careers, but also the markets as well. Like, generally we're seeing like despair overall, a lot of fear in the market. So there's a lot of like negative energy all around. Not sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel that. I think a few months back, but right now I feel that things are looking better, because to be honest, this is not the first time I'm feeling this. I think sometime in 2010, 2011, this was also quite a similar type of feeling, right? A lot of people are very pessimistic because I think by then I came out to work already, right? Then the markets back then, after the 0809 crash, right, people were extremely pessimistic about their jobs, their career and security, and actually, to be honest, I would say the large majority of people around my age group actually did okay, because I think end of the day, what's very difficult is to stay optimistic and take your future in your own hands, and that's really much about what we're going to talk about today, So I guess, like many things in life, right, I always like to start with the foundation. Right, so and this brings us to the next topic and the huge, gigantic monster that we try to tackle. And I think Ryan was talking to me about this yesterday, right? And he was saying that the more he thought about it, the more he wants to like score his high school. But okay, maybe I'd like to ask a question. Ryan, why do you think that education has failed us in promoting an abundance mindset?
This question is a really good question. Like you say, it's a very foundational to understanding abundance. Because this is where education starts, and like where you learn about abundance should start. But the actual fact is that we understand scarcity more than anything else from the current education system, at least speaking from my personal experience. So like it's a pretty like sensitive topic to talk about. So I'm just gonna keep this to my own personal experiences. So for context, right, I came from one of those private Chinese schools. So where we take like multiple syllabuses, where we have like the local ones as well as Chinese syllabuses like from Taiwan and China. And it was like an extremely toxic and hyper competitive environment. So the reason why I wanted to share a little bit on like why I came from like this specific Chinese school, right, is because like it's going to get a little bit philosophical. So like Confucianism, right? Like in Chinese, we normally there's like this catchphrase that normally people learn in primary school is from the San Zi Jing in Chinese. I'm not sure what they call this in English, but the phrase goes like this: 人之初，性本善. So basically, it translates roughly to humans are born with kindness. So basically that's it, and that's pretty much like the definition of like abundance. It's about like believing in the good in people, giving unconditional trust and faith. But what a lot of people don't talk about is that like in Confucianism, right, the actual thing that was passed around was actually 人之初性本恶. So that means that people are actually born with evil and darkness with them. And the whole philosophy was designed around this so that we have rules and like you know behaviors that we should behave by, like the kind of like the good guidelines to or the rules of life. And then people learn all this kind of like rules and to kind of like rein that evilness and darkness in. So from the start, there's actually not much trust in people, where you don't believe in like the goodness in people or the like the good faith in people. You unconditionally like, at least in from where I came from, right, we are kind of like conditioned to believe that we shouldn't like trust people that much. But like the more when I grew up, right, it's kind of like you have social media and all, and you start interacting with people online, without the facades and everything, and you would just realize that everyone's just being themselves on social media, and then it's like there's really nothing to hide. There's like really nothing much to distrust or whatnot. But coming back, the fact is that from where I came from, we are actually I was actually like growing up in an environment where there's a lot of distrust. There's a lot of how would I put it? It's kind of like a lot of distrust, a lot of negative emotions. It's toxic. It's hyper competitive. It's kind of like most schools also, right? Like when we talk about like the competition, there's always like the different classification systems where you have like the top 20%, and then the 60% where it's kind of like the middle of the bell jar curve, and then you have like the last 20% where those students, they actually get thrown under the bus. So I feel like I can comment on this, like because I've been in like all three different classes. So like throughout my high school life, I've been kind of like a ping pong ball going back and forth all these classes. So I've actually seen it all. I've seen the different attitudes. It's quite different. But what I see is that like the higher up you go, right, it becomes more and more toxic and competitive. Whereas like at the bottom, people actually don't care so much about like studying. But here's where it gets a bit sensitive, right? It's that like these different classes, in my school where I came from, the access, like the treatment of students is like much more unfair. In an education system, you would think that like it's actually students get like the same education throughout, and then the syllabuses is the same, the facilities are the same. But in my school, it's not the case. The higher up you go, the more access you have to like different subjects. Like you get to play around with the fun stuff like the computer lab and stuff like that. And you kind of like unlock like those chemical experiments, kind of stuff like that. So the higher up you go, the more modules or rather activities and like generally also the education and the study materials that you have will automatically be better. You get better teachers, you get better classrooms with aircon, you get that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like a cane and carrot kind of theory. So you're punished for sucking at your test, So you don't get aircon in class. Yeah, it's and the teachers that you get are generally like inexperienced and all that. And then, but the higher up you go, you get rewarded with like better equipment, better facilities, better education, better teachers, uh, aircon, facilities, better facilities overall. So it promotes competition in a way that is so toxic that like the higher up you go, the more toxic it gets, to the point where you would hear stories, or at least in my grade, right? You would hear stories about people teaching their friends or rivals the wrong thing so that they can get ahead. So that was the kind of school that I came from. It's, for the most part, it's not as bad as it sounds, but on the surface, it's also like quite prestige. It's a quite prestigious school. So the moment I say the name, everyone will know where I came from. In at least in like in Malaysia. But for the fact of the matter is, nobody actually talks about like what happens on the flip side. And yeah, it's a very unjust treatment in terms of like, if we talk about like schooling systems. So I mentioned like the top 20% and the middle 60% of students, right? Generally, they live very like good lives. But the bottom 20%, they kind of get thrown under the bus. So this is where like the scarcity starts coming in. So students are actually conditioned to believe that like the only way to get access to all this like better curriculum and all that is by studying extremely hard and getting ahead. And which I don't think like entirely it's wrong, because this is life also, right? You have to work hard, earn more money, get yourself into a better position. But in terms of education, this is where like it fails. At least it failed me, I would say, because what it taught me was that it's scarcity more than abundance. I am conditioned to not believe in abundance because like there's only everything like it is so, how would I put it? It's like scarce, like the good building with like aircon. There's just a couple of like classrooms that can take in like the top couple of students. We even get segregated, like some of the top tier students, they have like they study in like a different building. So it was very militarian in a way lah. So yeah, it's kind of like I don't want to say the word but it's common prosperity in a way lah. But but this is what I grew up with, and there has been like a lot of nobody actually talks about it. This is the fun part. And then it's like we are all conditioned to not believe in abundance. We are hardwired that way. And then when I came out, left the school, I came out for college. That is where I started to believe that actually everyone can excel. It's kind of like because the school has been judging us based on what they think that needs to be assessed. So there was like a lot of like the Chinese syllabus, and then there was like the Taiwanese. So fun fact, I learned biology in like 2 different languages. So it's English and also Chinese. But what's the point, right? Everyone calls COVID COVID. Nobody calls COVID whatever the Chinese name is nowadays. So that's where like coming back, like, that's where I think education in general it failed me, because like I'm conditioned to believe in scarcity. So when I stepped into society, or like even like college, like I mingled with people who are from like different education systems. Immediately I felt like much more relief and less tension like in life in general, because like we are not allowed to fail in my school, because failing is kind of like you get held back a year, and then that it's just a lot of a lot of things that they try to scare us with. But in like it for and also it's a private school, right? So you need to pay like a small fee. It's not exactly expensive. It's just around 300-400 a month. But like you get held back a year, so that means your parents will need to pay for more, and eventually, you get pressure from both the school and also your parents, which I think it's like normal in an Asian household. But that is like why, when you're conditioned with scarcity, you also believe that you're not allowed to fail. And that stops you from exploring, like in life in general. Like, you have to like fall fast, and then you have to make mistakes, fall fast, fail fast, and then you have to learn from your mistakes, and then you improve from there. That's kind of like how life works, right? But what my school taught me was that we are never allowed to fail. We are kind of like machines. You have to like churn out good grades, good papers, good essays, one after another. So that's the biggest hurdle I had when I actually stepped into society, because I'm actually allowed to fail for the first time in my life, right? I was allowed to fail, so it was like refreshing. At the same time, it's also scary. I was actually quite scared to like make leaps and experiment to do experiments and like to test new things out. Well, I wasn't very adventurous, but eventually, when I understood that there was actually an abundance of opportunity, and like there was an abundance of like chances to actually fail at, and it's not devastating. You can always get up and retry. It's okay to retry. It's okay to fail. That's when my life took a turn for the better. So yeah, 12 years of schooling in these Chinese private schools, they did not taught me a single thing that was good. And it was like upon graduating university, stepping into like the workforce, is where I actually learned that it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. Yeah.
As they say, fortune favors the bold.
Yes. you have to keep trying. You have to try things out so that you know what works for you, what doesn't. Because like I think the biggest pitfall also in like the education system, right, is that on top of like not being allowed to fail, you are also assessed on things that you are not good at. A lot of things that are also rubbish and useless in modern working environments, like languages and all that. But yeah, that's it's kind of like what Einstein said, right? You can't ask a fish to climb a tree. You can't give a test to a fish to actually climb a tree, because the fish would obviously fail because it cannot climb the damn tree at all. So that's kind of like how I see the education system. On top of like not being allowed to fail, it promotes toxic competition, and it also promotes like a lot of fear. So a lot of negative emotions driving the students to excellence in a way.
I like your story which you have shared. So thanks so much for sharing your personal experience, because I think a lot of the listeners who are listening in out there could have probably related to what that you are saying now. Because when I listened to it, I could reflect upon my own experience in the education system. I mean, I didn't come from a private school. I went to a public school in Singapore. So born, raised, blue-bred Singaporean, right? So I would say that, end of the day, you want to see whether or not the education system has promoted abundance mindset. It's quite simple. You just listen and speak to any fresh grad from universities. right? And listen to the way that they talk, right? Listen to the way that they speak, listen to the way that they go for their career, listen to the way that they plan for their career, listen to the way that they ask questions, right? And then you have a very good insight about whether or not the education system has worked, right? Because as much as the basic skills, things like English, math, science, history, all these are quite useful, as you go into your specific career, specific job. I think beyond that, what's more important is also developing that culture of being able to do better for people around, right? And I think end of the day, what makes it very tough in the education system is that they have inculcated a culture that there is artificial scarcity for everyone to do well, right? They call this the bell curve, right? And the problem with the bell curve is that it is it is quite artificial in a way because for the longest time, right, we always thought that there were limited placing inside universities, right? But the fact of the matter is, right, if you stretch the timeline long enough, I would argue that I think almost anyone can get into university. It's just a matter of whether or not you got the money to pay for it.
And if you look into the future far enough, right, it doesn't matter, really doesn't matter where you come from also, which university you actually graduate from. As long as you got a degree, you have a key to enter society and you can improve from there. It's never too late.
And on top of that, and on top of that, I would say that that's where it stems from, right? Because when you are very young, you're going through the university, right? They have always taught you that there's only one or two top classes you can get into. Then the rest of them are basically rich, right? And this caste system, right, is very archaic because it basically tells the person if you make one mistake, if you don't do well in that particular year, then you get knocked down 2 or 3 classes below your ranking right? Which is, as you say, is quite toxic In Singapore, it's not that bad. I mean, education system, they're quite good at taking care of the entire hierarchy But in terms of the payment for taking care of it is that people pay in terms of their time. Right. So for example, if you fail your in Singapore we call it PSLE, right? Let's say you don't do well for PSLE, then you basically have to pay 1 more year in your secondary school. Then you pay maybe 1 year inside. You go to normal academic or normal technical, right? Then you basically pay 1 more year So you stay inside secondary school for 1 more year. Then the people who do very well, they don't pay that year. They basically finish 4 years, then they go. So when staying back itself, right, it's not just the money, but it's also the time. And this time, right, can be very expensive, right? Once you hit your 20s, when you finish your university, right, a person who takes the fast track can probably start work around 24. But a person, right, let's say he failed all his subjects, right, maybe he only start working around 28. That's 4 years.
Wow, that's a lot of time. In Malaysia, at most, if you stretch it out, right, you kind of save just 2 years. But it's still a lot, to start work at 22 versus 24.
Yeah. So
because we don't have to go to army.
Army in Singapore we also have go army. So for a guy, assuming let's say you very jialat you fail everything, right? Then you really take the turtle slow next speed Then some more you add in army. By the time you get to work, right, maybe you can hit around 27, 28. So basically 70% of your 20s is gone already. Yeah, but the huge problem, right, that I've noticed is that the recourse in order for you to go back into the fast track is not really available. As much as your brain, once you hit around your early 20s, I would say that most people have can pretty much maturely have that discipline to do well in studies already right? Yeah. Because for me, I didn't really start doing well in studies until my early 20s because that's when it clicked. That's when I realized, actually it's not that difficult to study. It really is not that tough, right? I didn't do well in my primary and secondary school, but then I finished at 25 with 2 masters and 2 chapters.
No, but that's the thing, right? In education systems are the primary and secondary, you're forced to learn things that you cannot excel in. But in university, the scope is much less. It's much more focused. So normally students can actually focus better because less is there's less material to cover and you can generally like focus more. So yeah, that's also like where like I would say this is coming from.
Yeah. So I mean, end of the day, the reason why education is so important is because when you hear stories like that, you have to realize that a lot of this is issue because a lot of this like culture, right, is reinforced, right, when a person is growing up, between the ages of 6 all the way to the ages of the teenage years, say 16, 17 years old. So when you are conditioned over 12 years to be repeatedly told that there is artificial scarcity, it really does build a very strong foundation and very difficult for a person once they reach adulthood to break away from that. There is scarcity in the workplace.
Yeah, it sticks with you, you know. It sticks with you.
It does. And it
And
makes you very fearful.
I still see people from my school like living like the way they are. It's quite scary.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And then if you contrast that between, let's say, students who comes from families, right, where they have an abundance mindset, because basically their culture education, right, is so powerful at home that it doesn't really matter what they do in school. Then you realize that these people are very different on the way that they look at life, lah. You know, life is full of possibilities and abundance. You just have to seize the opportunities, right? So the ones who I realized get harmed the most are usually the people in the middle, right? Because they are neither here nor there. You know, a man who has nothing and a man who has everything, generally you'll realize they're quite similar. Because a man who has nothing, right, he knows he has nothing, therefore he basically has nothing to fear, right? And a man who has everything, right, you know, he also don't really need to worry so much because he knows he has options.
Yeah.
Right. So in a way, these two are quite similar in the way that they look at life. It's just that maybe the living conditions are not similar. But in terms of mental freedom, right, both of them can say that there's some sort of resemblance out there. So the ones who really do get harm in this is the middle class. And so now we have like highlighted like what is this issue, right? I mean, to be honest, I don't really think there's a huge like solution for this, because there's no easy solution for education, right? Apart from once you understand this, right, you know, then basically going forward, the only real way to solve this is that if you do have kids, then just make sure that you educate them on this, right? Because that's where the education and culture starts, right? No matter how strong the education system is, what is stronger will be the education that you give to your children, right, going forward. So maybe now that all of us are adults already, right? So to reinforce this, right, the next topic is, what are the pitfalls of scarcity? Like, why is this scarcity so mindset, right, so toxic to doing things around? Basically, like, how does this cause a lot of issues in our life? Maybe you'd like to start, Ryan?
Yeah. I would say like if scarcity is the opposite of abundance, right? And like how we talked about abundance being like the foundation for like happiness and peace of mind and all that. So scarcity will be the foundation for depression. So because like it kind of like conditions you to think that there's always like things are always in a shortage. It's always not enough. You are always not enough, you know. So what happens is that I see people burning their own candles in both ends and trying to overcompensate, you know, because they think that they are short on time or they are behind, or because they believe that they started like later in life than other people, or like they had like a late start, you know. But the fact of the matter is, right, it's like there's a lot of chickens out there. You don't need to go and queue up in the supermarket to buy chicken because there's a chicken shortage. There's more than enough for everyone. You have to believe that. The pie is big enough for everyone to share. And another thing that like scarcity promotes is that I generally find, like even in myself when I like didn't believe in abundance, right, is that what I believed was the world cannot be interdependent on each other. So you have to get things done alone, by yourself. You have to like, it's a one-man show, you know. You take it all on yourself. So it goes back to like stress, right? So it builds up stress. Eventually that stress will turn into depression. So it's okay. So like and it goes back to the point where I said like you don't allow yourself to fail and like experiment with other options, possibilities, because or maybe you'll find like a better solution out there, but who knows, because you have something that's working and you know you can execute it yourself. So you don't go ask for help, you don't try to like relieve pressure on yourself, you don't give yourself a break. So that's where all the negative emotions come from. At least that's what I feel. So scarcity, yeah, it's kind of like a downward spiral, like I said. So it will trigger negative emotions on top of negative emotions, and then eventually it will just drive you crazy. You have to go see a doctor or something. But yeah, that's what I think about scarcity. Eventually, this scarcity, if this person starts to invest, right, it will reflect on their portfolio. And I like to say like it's like value versus growth lah, in a way.
Yep.
Because like growth is about believing in the future. Scarcity is about now. So
Protecting your downside.
yes, protecting your downside, having like a larger margin of safety and all that. But by doing that, you are limiting yourself to like so-called value stocks, which has an alpha of like 20% over the next 5 years with dividends included. So the furthest you will go is 20, 25%, 30 if you're lucky. But for growth, you're gonna do a 10x over 5 years. You're gonna do like a 10x if you're lucky, 100x. You know, if you do like all the moonshots and all that. So yeah, that's kind of like the pitfalls of scarcity. The in a nutshell, right? It holds you back in life. It stops you from trying, and then you're always trapped in this little bubble where you believe that you're not enough. You have to like compensate or overcompensate for with hard work and like hard work that actually brings you nowhere. Methods that are not the smart way to work around. It holds you back in life. This is scarcity.
And you hit the nail on the head in terms of like your end of the day, right? Your beliefs will drive your action, and it drives your mental state, and it drives your the way that you live your life lah, right? And then one of the biggest issues whenever I do personal finance with people around me, right, is that the moment I sit down and ask them, right, what they want to achieve, what is their goal in life, right, I can pretty much like sense what type of mentality they have, right? Because usually there are two broad categories of people who do personal finance. The first type of people are people who like to save a lot of money, right? They believe in doing well by saving a lot of money. The second type of people believe in doing well by making a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
So this is where we're going to go into the balance of like what you actually need both lah. But usually what I notice is that people tend to shift towards heavier on one or the other side. But as you start to grow older and you start to grow wiser, right, in terms of money, generally what you want to do is that you want to do both, right? You should be able to save more, all right, because you realize you don't need a lot. But that does not mean that you become a cheapskate lah. It just means that you are a person who don't succumb to materialism or consumerism, because you realize that the most and the best things in life, it doesn't really stem from, having a lot of things in your life lah. Happiness really does stem from things that make you happy on the inside. And it cannot come from approval from other people. It needs to come from acceptance of who you are, and then you need to basically do a lot. You need to like yourself and love yourself, and then after that, right, then you need to love yourself before people can do that lah. Validation has to come from the inside. Confidence has to come from the inside, right? And then once you understand this, right, then it really isn't about scarcity, right? Because and this is where you realize that the pitfalls of the education system come into play lah. Because if you have been conditioned over the last 12 years that there is scarcity things, right, you start to realize that when things like COVID hit, when things like chicken shortage hit, right, everybody queue up to buy shit.
Fucking toilet paper.
Right, holding like toilet paper. But I mean, look, the very old people, I don't blame them, because they probably been through like World War I, World War II, right? Then they also been through bank runs lah, so they probably have been through enough to understand that things will, that there's a potential for that lah. But I will say that if you have plan your finances well, now diversify your holdings enough, right, generally that should not be an issue, right? And it really does affect the way that you live your life. Because generally what I've noticed is that people who tend to believe on the brighter side and more optimistic, right, generally that's where their life will be headed. But people who are always very pessimistic, very like scarcity mindset driven, only believe there's only like 10 positions, in the world who is like basically like worth fighting for, right, then generally their life will be quite stress, because this is really like limitation that you might have imposed on yourself, you know, like and also like, you know, when you think about things like a very like broad statement. Let's say for example, I'm a Singaporean, right? Let's say, oh, Singapore is the only country in the world that is safe and is the best country in the world, but then I've not even like gone overseas and try and live. How would you know? Right? How would you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? How would you know? Right? So it's like you cannot really make that statement without actually having like tried living overseas, right? To actually
make that comparison and all.
Yeah. So because you have not done it yourself, right? If you can only speak, you know, the Singaporean lingo and not really like gone overseas and live, you cannot really make that statement without realizing how much opportunities. And then, you know, I think this is like a very fundamental problem for people who really want to do better in their lives, because like in so much of the social media has always been like saying that, you know, you must do better in your career. But what does that really mean, right? Because when you say you want to do better in your career, right, they always talk about the how. But before you even talk about the how, you know, we always must talk about the why lah. You know, why you want to do that and why. And then is it even possible? And the answer is, I think it is very difficult for people to wrap around their head, right? That making money is actually not very difficult, to be honest.
Yeah, I think this is the biggest trigger for me, right? It's like in school, right? All the teachers, you know, you fail their class and they'll come to you and say, you fail my class, you're not going to make it very far in life. What does that mean, right?
Yeah, you know, that
like what kind of like I clearly remember this is like a bit of like a bullying from a teacher, you know. I did really badly in calligraphy. So like it was okay, but to be fair, it was like a very old lady lah. She was not nice, okay. So we had like assessments on these so-called calligraphy lah. So they kind of like make sure you write calligraphy well in my school. But what does that have to do with life and making money, right? So I failed in this class, and then I failed in this test specifically, and then I got made fun of. So basically, my paper, my calligraphy was on like the board of shame, and then I somehow had to like parade my calligraphy around the school.
You went to Game of Thrones school, is it?
Yeah, shame.
Game of Thrones, shame. Game of Thrones like that.
But yeah, like she came up to me and said, this lady, right? She came up to me and said, "You're not gonna make it very far in life because you have no tenacity in anything you do." But the fact of the matter is, I cannot Chinese. Like you listen to this white ass accent sometimes, you would wonder like, did I actually go to Chinese school and like did I actually study and am I like a banana? Like the fact of the matter is I am, you know. But I'm okay lah. But to be fair, I'm like bilingual. I can speak Chinese. It's just not the pitch perfect. Sure, China, Shanghai slang, you know. But you know, I'm just worse in Chinese. I can understand it, but I cannot speak it. I cannot write it like on a business level. But and even now when I conduct business with like the people from China, right, I realize I don't have to speak pitch perfect Chinese. I realize I don't have to write perfect grammatical Chinese, because most of the time they speak English.
And their English is better than your Mandarin.
Exactly. They speak some of them they actually speak better English than like some of the English speakers in Malaysia. It's insane, you know. Their English is pitch perfect. You can hear the proper pronunciation with some of them even comes with an accent. Okay. So mind you, don't look down on them. Yeah, the white man accent, you know. Some of them, they actually do have this kind of accent. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
But like, you know, what does like this is where, but coming back, we drifted off topic already. But like, the education system, right, is kind of like this. They judge you based on something, and then they make you believe that is you for the whole life, or that is your identity. They punish you based on that one thing. You know, that's like and if you're conditioned like this over like 6-12 years, you know, how can you,
the formative years of your life, I must add.
And this is like the teenage years especially is where you mature and start to understand this kind of like more spiritual and like emotional side of human nature, right? So like if you grew up learning this kind of shit, it sticks with you through your life. And then it's quite like what Aaron said, it's quite hard to actually break through. It took a lot from me to actually break from that as well. In my early 20s, right? Like the first half of my 20s, I am gonna admit that I have a very troubled mind. So I turned to like a lot of like I tried to understand myself a lot by reading self-help books. So eventually what I found that actually was helpful is to like kind of like understand philosophy and psychology a bit more. Like specifically, I studied a lot like Stoicism, and like from the East, there's like the Confucianism, Zen Buddhism, and all that. And then psychology, there's like always like a couple of different fields of like origin where there's like three different origins where they have like one they call the Orderian psychology, the other one it's like the Jung or Jung, Jung, whatever. I'm not sure how they pronounce it, but that's kind of like where all the definitions of like modern day psychology comes from. So it's like I studied a lot of all this, and eventually I kind of like understood things from my teenage years where I don't understand. So like it helps to kind of like go back to understand the roots of like the problem and like all this spiritual and kind of like studies like the Zen Buddhism in particular, like Zen Buddhism and Stoicism help a lot. Not so much on like Confucianism, but yeah.
I can second that because personally I also went through something quite similar. Then I didn't really unlock my true potential until my early 20s in my life when I really like sat down, during army in 2 years, then like read books right? Because in army there's nothing else we can do, right? So we just sit down literally in our bunk. Then I just go to the library, then read everything. So and that created an alternate sort of like education for me, because before that I've always been taught to the way that we teach us to the way that we educated ourselves was to listen to someone else. But it's an entirely different thing when you try to learn education and educate yourself, right? Because you are making a conscious and active decision on picking up what you want to learn. And that is something which the formative years of education is not very good at, right? It is very effective at teaching people, right, what they want you to learn, but it's not very effective at teaching you what you want to learn for yourself and start being good at it, right? And that really translates to what you call the scarcity and abundance mindset, right? Because if you are coming from a standpoint where you need to be good in something, then it creates artificial competition, artificial scarcity. Because as you mentioned just now, right, you cannot get a fish to climb a tree. Likewise, many people, they have many different strengths in life. Some are just better creative, some people are just better operators, some people are good with numbers. And then if you just narrow, the so-called system success, right, to basically lawyer or doctor, these are the two highly sought after like Asian family career paths, right? Either you be a lawyer, doctor, then maybe a banker, right? Then basically these are the only three paths. Then you create a lot of unneeded competition, right? Because not everybody is suited to be in these roles. Right, if you look at the legal side, the attrition for lawyers is more than 50% in the first 4 years. You stretch it out to 10 years, the number of people who quit law is close to 70%.
Yeah.
Right? So, and that's not just law. It can be you go to accounting, that's even worse, right? Because after the first 5 years, you get your ass kicked in a big four, right? Then you try to move to private. Then you realize that you spend your entire decade of your life learning accounting, right? Then that might not be something that you actually like yourself because the work hours are insane, right? Whereas if you look across today in the social media era, you might be able to see artists who are probably earning more than a Big Four accountant, right?
Yeah, doing TikTok dances.
Doing TikTok dances, right? And then I guess that's where we're coming from, and that is basically like in this particular era, right? While it is important for us to learn things like math, English, and science, but I think discounting the fact, we shouldn't really discount the fact that career opportunities are just limited to what education has taught, because the career opportunities depends on what you just need to find a skill set which you have true passion and what you're good at, right? That's where you start. Then from there, try to find a job that rewards that unfair advantage, because everybody does have unfair advantage. Like for me, my unfair advantage is that I'm very, very good with numbers. So obviously it doesn't make sense for me to be a doctor, right? Because
Yeah,
if I'm
exactly.
good in numbers, why would I want to be a doctor, right? Or why would I want to be a lawyer? I just, it just doesn't make sense for me in my case, right? So, and then if you're good with art, right, it doesn't really make sense for you to start a career in, let's say, law school or in law school or being a doctor. Because if you're very good in art, the fact of the matter is there are positions in the world who pays you very well for being a very good artist, right? If you can go and work at Disney, you can work in the US. And today, it's not very difficult for a person to go from, let's say, Singapore to go US and find a work and a career. It's not difficult to like cross oceans, it's just a plane ride only, right? So
That's the I kind of like want to go back to the education system here, like it rewards students for being like problem solvers, but not so much on like critical thinking and being a content creator and like kind of like creative in general. So it's kind of like widely seen, like in I'm not sure in how it works in Singapore, but at least in Malaysia, right? The STEM subjects, the science stream, it's basically much more preferred than art stream. So like art or commerce in general. So like from what I can see, the people who studied in like art stream, right, they are generally like more creative people. They innovate better, Or let's not talk about science, lah. They are more creative. They draw very well. They sing very well. They create content. And a lot of my friends from the art stream, a lot of them kind of like turn into content creators as well. So they are also like making quite good money. So it's and some are and like fact of the matter is like the science stream students, right? They go through the whole education system. They go through university, and then they come out. They become like consultants, or they become like some scientists or doctors or like whatnot. And in the end of the day, like problem solving kind of like careers, right? There's a lot of stress in them because you are solving people's problems. They're not your own problems. So that's why like this is where all the stress comes from. Whereas like for these creative types, right? They answer to their own selves. They create like content on based on their own mood, like what they're feeling today. So yeah, that's kind of like how I see like in general, like Asian culture, we people like to be doctors, lawyers, but fact of the matter is like no matter your science or arts or creative or like problem solving, and you can make money. You just have to understand yourself and find a niche to slot yourself into the value chain. There's always like a place for you.
Yeah, that's why I made that comment. Actually, making money is not that difficult, right? The reason why people find making money difficult is because they are basically not utilizing their unfair advantage, right? Because
You have to understand yourself.
Yeah, because if you like start out, let's say if naturally I'm good with numbers, but if I go and be a doctor, for me making money is going to be very difficult for me, right? Because I have to work twice or three times as hard, trying to make the same money that a person has a natural affinity with, let's say, medicine, right? But if let's say I'm an artist, right? And then that's what I love to do, 24/7, I only can think of paintbrush in my head or colors in my head, right? Then even within art, in like, I can say this, why? Because I went to art school, right? I did like three years of art. So I was a creative, but not naturally I'm not good at it, but I realized that the art spectrum, the way that art is structured, right? The production is such a broad range. You have pre-production, production, and post-production, right? That's even during the production phase, right? Let's say you do an animated film, there's like there's people who do rigging, people who do 3D models, people who do texture, people who do animation,
Yeah.
people who do like, it's so broad and such a huge broad chain of production chain, right? It's like a McDonald's system, right? You just need to find a particular part of that wheel, right, which you naturally like, right? You can find your job one. It's really not difficult, right? The problem that most people have is that they don't believe it, because it stems from belief, you see. Because the moment you believe that it is not possible, right, you won't even bother to try.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, right, I would say like these creative fields are like the game production, animation productions. They earn more than engineers these days.
Yeah, of course. Like I can give you an example. When I first started in animation, a person who's very good at rigging, his monthly income is at least 8 to 9 thousand US a month.
Yeah, because these are like niche fields. These kind of
Yeah.
experts, they don't come along often. So they get paid very well.
And it's difficult. And the fact of the matter is, it's not an easy job to do. But the people who love it, people who really like spend their entire life like doing this, right? They get paid well because the number of people who can do it is very little. So obviously they get paid higher, lah, right? And then I think that's why this whole idea that money is difficult to come by, right, only stems from a belief, because you are like basically succumbing to a belief, right, that the reason why it's tough is because you're in a field which is very competitive, and it might not necessarily be a field that you can thrive in, you see, because end of the day, right, money is easy, right, only if you're doing a job, right, which actually you feel that is easy. If you have to force yourself, right, to do a job that you don't like, right, then obviously the money that you make is going to be very difficult to make, lah. Right?
Yeah.
You get what I mean? So
Yeah.
like people always say like, oh, investing is so difficult, you have to trade. I say, actually to me it's very easy. Why? Because I love it. I've been doing it for so many years, and the reason I've been managing to do it for so many years is because I love to do it. Like people always say, oh, Aaron, don't you think like consulting job is difficult money? I say, no, it's not, because it's easy for me. It's because I love doing that work, right? I found something which I like to do. That's why it doesn't really feel like it's difficult for me. You get what I mean? So, and it, as I mentioned, it really stems from beliefs that you have as a person, right? Because end of the day, whether or not you choose to believe this really depends from whether or not you personally inside really believe so. Because if you don't believe so, you won't even bother to try, right? And then it's a very long process, right, for a person, right, to actually have to go through the learning process to believe, make it like a core belief, or as Napoleon Hill like to say, think and grow rich, right? Because you have to go through a lot of rewiring in your head, then instead of looking at the world through a lens, right, where, oh, this is limited, that is limited, you should probably ask yourself, is there another way, right, which you can actually like expand more and go towards the growth trajectory? Because this relates to our next question, right, and that is, how does this affect our perspectives in asset class? Because you really cannot really run away from the topic of personal finance and investing when it comes to life, because that is really like the fundamental way that we live life, right? Because at the end of the day, as an adult, a really adult show, there is bills to pay. You have to worry about your parents' retirement sometimes, right? Then if you belong to the sandwich generation, right, then of course you have to worry about your future. You have to worry about your past, your present, your future. Your past is your parents, right? You have to worry about present, which is yourself, and your future is which is your retirement and your kids, right? So like in terms of scarcity, right, how does this affect perspectives in asset class? So I think maybe Ryan, you can consider taking the stocks one, then I'll take the real estate.
Yeah, sure. So, like what we mentioned just now, right? In terms of stocks or like any like stocks in general, right? There's always like the two value and growth styles, or like methods, whatever you like to call it. But personally, what I found is that people who do value, or rather value, right? Not the people. Value, the idea of value investing comes from scarcity itself. Value investing fundamentally is always looking out for a bargain somewhere, and it promotes scarcity in a way that not many stocks are actually undervalued. You have to find really, really hard to actually find a stock that is undervalued. And these days, like modern day investing, maybe 20, 30 years ago, I would say like it works like a charm, So, but nowadays, nothing much is like so-called undervalued anymore, because stocks investing became so commonplace here. All the so-called the PE ratio and everything looks overweight or overvalued, nowadays. Like the whole value versus growth. And then like when we talk about growth, right, it's like from the scarcity perspective, it's kind of like saying that you're overpaying for something. But then what happens if it keeps growing and growing and growing and goes 10x and does another 10x? What do we have to say about that, right? Because like that's growth. They have the potential to go that far. They actually do. You just have to believe it. I mean, it's not to say like you blindly believe something will go like 100x to the moon or something. you have to like do your own due diligence, study the technology, and also study like how this technology is being wrapped up as a product, how its sales is doing, all that. And then you actually like from there you can tell, whether the technology has like a potential to actually make that much money or not. But like, and that's what growth investing is all about. You believe in like the abundance of opportunity or abundance of like room for a company to grow that much. But what happens if you are driven and hardwired by scarcity? You cannot believe these companies will go that far. I'll just give you an example. Value versus growth. Ford, GM versus Tesla. Tesla pulled like in the most recent quarter, how many percent of revenue growth was that again? I can't remember. But it's over 50, right? Yeah, it's 50%. And then the CFO is still saying for the second half of the quarter, they still can pull another 50%.
And keep in mind, there was no company on planet Earth that I've seen and I researched on this that actually grew by more than 50% after they crossed that 25 billion revenue. Not Apple, not Google, not Microsoft. This is the first company in the world who has managed to achieve 50% year-on-year growth after they crossed the 25 billion.
Yeah. Oh, and sometimes I still cannot believe, despite of how big they grow, right? Large numbers, right? The bigger your revenue, the market cap is, the less you're gonna grow. But no, man, Tesla is defying gravity, and I'm so grateful that I continue to help and help on. I hodled, and I'm thanking myself for this decision. But in contrast, right, value, we talk about like GM, just in the EV space, like GM, Ford, what did they do? They actually decrease the price of their EVs. At a time like this, where inflation is like an all-time high, people like don't really go out and buy cars. If you look at like used car prices, it's all skyrocketing still. And at a time like this, GM and Ford dropped prices for their EVs. What does that tell you about the so-called value? Like, it doesn't work. They like in the end of the day, it's not about how fairly priced the company is. It's about like to at least to a growth investor like me. I believe in the potential where the company can grow. Valuations are secondary or like not sometimes not even exist. Not to say like it's non-existent, but like it's still important in a way. Like in the grand scheme of things, macroeconomics and all. But how would I put it? It's like you have to research enough to believe that certain companies they actually have what it takes to give you the exponential return, and that's where the alpha comes from. Same thing for Bitcoin. Bitcoin's a bit like a rare case. Like, you have to believe in the technology, but you also have to understand the scarcity to a certain degree to actually get that there's only 21 million Bitcoins out there. So that like it's like a supply and demand game. But for stocks, right, like growth stocks versus these value stocks, you have to understand business and economics in general. Some companies their time is up. Some companies they just got started. But how do you actually evaluate when their time is up, or or if they are still growing 50% a year? That's where you have to sit down and actually look at the financial statements and all that. Look at the performance and make your comparisons fairly, without through the lens of like value investing and all the so-called PE metrics and all. I think like what I said, 30 years ago, maybe it worked, because at that point of time, it's like the value investing in general is still, it kind of works, like, because the money supply was not as much, the US dollar was still kind of like on the gold standard. It didn't like deviate from like the gold standard, but that was like in 1970s, right? That was a 70.
Gold standard.
That was a long time ago. So like to people who don't know, right, Intelligent Investor was wrote before then. So it was wrote based on the assumption where the US dollar will stay on the gold standard.
Yep.
the moment where the gold US dollar deviated from the gold standard, this thesis actually went down really because the fundamental assumption is already wrong.
Yep.
The US dollar runs on a printer now.
Yep. Actually, I love that. I love that you made that point. Actually, I never thought of that before. But that was a very good point you made.
So the game is different now. So you have to transition from value to a new philosophy that actually works, and that's growth investing. Because when your money is running on like a printer, right, there's going to be so much cash around. It needs to go somewhere, So like it will go to a black hole where there's limitless potential for it to grow. And that's where you get like all this exponential growth like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. Because like you will not have heard of like these kind of exponential growth before the 2000s. Or rather like, okay, we have, but it's like after 1970s, you got companies like Nike, right?
Yeah.
And then what else was like a growth stock? Apple, yeah. And then Microsoft,
Polaroid.
Google, and then the
Polaroid.
Yeah.
IBM. I mean, those were the 1970s. Then, obviously, after the personal computer, we went to... I would say that every single decade, right, there's always a company who creates what they call blue ocean sectors.
I like how you brought this up because, like, the difference between scarcity and abundance is, like, kind of like understanding blue oceans and like red oceans as well.
Yep.
If you get trapped in like a red ocean, right, that is scarcity because you have to fight for business opportunities that are rare. You have to create like a product that is kind of like the mobile game at this point, or the mobile phone game at this point. Like
marginal growth, I must say.
Marginal growth for like what, like you add in like a new camera and then you call this revolutionary. It creates like a lot of like needless innovations because it feels like the industry is trying to one up each other, and it brings
the same customers.
Exactly.
New customers. You're just fighting with existing customers.
The customer base stays the same. It's the 7 billion people or in the world, and that's about it. You know, the market cannot grow anymore, and that's why people are fighting in a red ocean. So naturally, like good entrepreneurs, they will look for like a new field for growth. So this is where like the blue oceans come in. You have to go out and look for new opportunities, new innovations in unheard fields. And then that's where you get the exponential growth. And as investors, we want to capitalize on that. So that's my take on how abundance and like scarcity relates to stock investing.
And I think Brian did a very good job explaining like scarcity and abundance in terms of investing in stocks. Because I would like to add on top of that, Benjamin Graham didn't become a billionaire through a value investor. For most of you who do not know, he actually became a billionaire, right, by being a growth investor.
Yeah, and it's the same thing, for Warren Buffett. People think he is like a value investor. He is not. This guy is 10 years ahead of the trend, okay? He is a growth investor. He planted a seed 10 years ago in clean energy. Y'all don't see that coming. Yeah. He bought like how many percent of like the energy companies in the US? All of them, like 80% of what he owns is clean energy, mind you.
Bought BYD, the China EV.
Yeah, that's before Tesla. That's before Tesla. So like this guy's a growth investor.
Yeah, so I think guys, you need to like really like do a little bit more due diligence before you believe the old adage saying of stock investing, like value investing is always the best because I'm seeing this narrative play out again. Right, when I first got into investing, I was a gullible idiot, right? Like many people today who believe in value investing. But as I start to grow older, I realized that growth investing has always been the better choice. Largely because the industry itself is structurally designed to underweight growth, if that makes sense. Okay, I give you an example. A normal fund, mutual fund, right? The maximum exposure they can put inside one position is 10%. A very good example you can look at is Cathy Wood's ARK Invest. The maximum they can allocate in one idea is 10%, right?
Yeah, there has to be a certain level of like diversification to iron out any volatility in one stock. Let's just
and
put it that
also,
way.
and because the industry is designed this way, right, you very quickly realize that the ones which are the most mispriced most of the time are actually growth companies. Because value investing, right, it works in the mutual funds advantage if they limit their exposure to 1 to 3% because they need to diversify, because value stocks, there's only maybe a maximum of 20-30% growth based on the margin of safety lah. So maybe you buy let's say a growth stock, then maybe maximum it can grow by 30%, right? So you only put about 2 or 3% in case it blows out. So it's in your favor to diversify when you do value investing. So that is why value investing is a red ocean, because it tends to basically allocation structural fund, mutual fund wise, right? It makes sense for them to diversify, right? Because the position sizing is in favor to value investors. But if you look at growth investing, the way that mutual funds are structured, right, fundamentally is not in favor to value growth investments correctly. Because maximum they can put 10% unless you run a hedge fund. But even if you run a hedge fund, it's very rare you see one hedge fund just buy one idea, because they need to justify their fees, right? So they need to plant many seeds, correct?
Yes.
So I mean, when you come from this standpoint, you very quickly realize, right, that most of the time, retail investors, the huge advantage that they have, right, that mutual funds don't have, is that unlike Cathy Wood, who can only put in 10% in Tesla, you can put 80, 90, even 100% of your net worth inside Tesla and just wait for these mutual funds to catch up to you. And then they decide to put in. Because by the time they can put in 10% or maximum, right, basically it becomes like Apple. It has really become a multi-trillion-dollar business really, to justify them putting so much. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the risk-adjusted return is like in a very safe margin for them really.
Yeah, and actually that's the main issue when it comes to like scarcity versus abundance lah. Because what I've noticed is that the maximum you can gain, let's say from value stocks, is only 50%. Right, I would say 50, optimistically maybe 100%. Very rare you can get 10x from value investing, because usually value investments are they're quite shit. Usually the company, the growth is like stagnant, and you're only buying it because maybe temporarily there's some depression, and therefore it doesn't work out . Whereas for a growth stock, right, the maximum it can grow, right, is unlimited. If you had put in just 1 or 2%, let's say in a growth idea, right, it doesn't have to be Tesla. It can be some niche company which you observe from afar is growing, right, in your particular field, right. There are many examples of that. If you work in the medical field, there's this company called Da Vinci, right. They basically are the manufacturers of those when you go to operate
surgical robots,
right? Yeah, surgical robots, right. If you actually notice Da Vinci, right, as a medical surgeon, right, you realize that this company, I think, has done quite well over the last 10 years. Right. How do I know this? Very simple. Because 10 years ago, when I was a very bumbling investor, I actually read Warren Buffett. He actually bought this company called Da Vinci. Yeah. So people who say that Warren Buffett is not a growth investor, he bought that stock because that stock is a growth stock. I think that stock did quite well over the last 10 years. You can go and read up on the story on that. It was a very interesting play on that. So in many ways, right, this also affects the next topic, which is real estate, because this is something which we want to talk about because as you all know, especially people who stays in Malaysia, right, that the rental rates have been increasing to astronomical heights as of late. Even in Singapore, a lot of people also have been complaining that rental rates are increasing. So it's very difficult for me to address this because I've always viewed real estate as pretty much a artificial scarcity type of asset class. The reason is very simple, because most of the time when people talk about real estate, why it has to go up, right, it's because they always say land is limited. And the issue is that as a Singaporean who go to Malaysia, right, when you all tell me that land is scarce, when I drive across the Tuas checkpoint, and then I go to your country, and you tell me that land is scarce, right, I don't understand that at all.
Hey, Malaysians, don't embarrass me, cannot.
Where's your land is scarce? As a Singaporean, I will beg to differ, land is scarce. Right. So I think, to put it in a more apt term, is probably they say that the land that most people where business is happening is scarce. Right. I think that is probably more apt. Like, for example, business opportunities. Let's say you want to find work that maybe has more international relations, then you go to KL, then maybe you can make the argument that land is scarce, because the rental yields there is quite expensive, I think, to stay in KL. right? Because I checked Airbnb, I think the asking rate is a bit crazy for Malaysia lah. Because I'm like in my head, I don't know how Malaysians, average Malaysian can afford the rent in KL if that's the price, right? So I think that narrative used to be relevant maybe 10 or 15 years ago, but I would make the argument that it has kind of changed during and after COVID, the era where most people realize, right, they can actually make and do work, right, from home, right? Because now, last time the playing field used to be that you need to go to office and work. You need to go to office, show your face, get work done, get shit done. But I think what is going to happen, not necessarily immediately, okay, is that in the next 5 years, right, I believe more value can be created from home. Because we have really proven, right, the proof of concept has really been proven in the last 2 years that people can work from home and still deliver world-class results. Because I mean that is a reality lah. It can be done, right? And then what I'm also witnessing when I'm traveling around APAC, right, is that I do have friends who have successfully transited to online remote working, right? And then they are earning a pretty above average income compared to where they are staying in their particular country, right? So I see this as a proof of concept. Okay, the only problem right now is that I need to see proof of scale, right? But personally, I believe that it will come, because if you are a traveler like me, and you have been traveling around APAC, and if you have been up to date with the visas that is being released in APAC, you will start to realize that the governments around APAC are being very, very lenient in wanting to attract digital nomad workers, right? Indonesia, Thailand, right? I think Laos, Myanmar, I think even Malaysia, I'm not sure about Malaysia, but they are already releasing visas where it is very flexible. You can prove that, you have a viable business. They allow you to come to a country and stay for a year, and then you just renew every year. Okay, so what will this do in the next 5 years? Okay, very simple. People who have managed, right, to solve the problem from earning an income online, right, will now be able to go anywhere in APAC with a viable visa and basically stay there, right? So you no longer need to stay in, let's say, the city town KL. You no longer need to come to Singapore and rent an apartment for 2,000 Sing dollars a month, all right? And then stay with your neighbors who have no privacy in a single room with shared toilet, right? And then basically trying to save like 500 Sing dollars a month, right? Like that, I think that is pretty much like the past really. And then for people who don't believe that this future is going to come, I think they are living in a fishbowl, right? Because I think end of the day, right, people will always, end of the day, they will sort of make the change if their standard of living will get better, right? Because the first few people who do this, right, people like me, people like the people that I met around with, they are going to start to influence their friends right back home, right? And then their friends, right, will go and look at their life and then wonder, can I do that? The moment that thought process enters their head, right, I can bet you they will start to think about it. And the moment once they start to think about it, right, the people, right, who, especially the young people, especially in countries where the population is aging, all right, countries where the prices of real estate is increasing, right? People will start to think in their head, do I really want to stay in this country?
Yeah, I really like how you frame it, like mobile work and all, because like personally I find this is like the nice part about like being able to work remotely, is that you can move to a country where your expenses are cheaper, like 3 times cheaper. Like let's say not even, okay, maybe not 3 times cheaper. Like let's say, in just within Malaysia, right? You live in KL, you earn a wage in KL based company, so it's naturally higher than like whatever you're gonna earn in, say, like other towns like Penang or like Sabah. But if you compare your living conditions, like say in KL, right, you're not gonna get much in terms of like rent in KL, because the so-called artificial scarcity. Your room is going to be small. Your place is going to be like just like 300-400 square feet, and then it's going to be like astronomically expensive. Yeah, far also, yeah, far and expensive. You still have to drive a damn car, and then you have to take the pass through like highways, pay toll and everything. Whereas
True
like
flood.
versus, exactly, yeah, versus like you live in a nice place, say your hometown, Kelantan, Terengganu, or Penang, your expenses are like way cheaper there, Play a char kway teow there, you still can get it's getting expensive in Penang, but like 7 6 7 ringgit, you still can get a nice plate of char kway teow. In KL, one plate of char kway teow is 10 ringgit. 10 11 ringgit is like 3 4, at least
Yeah, that's
5 ringgit more.
expensive. That's very expensive. Like
Yeah,
that's pretty much like restaurant prices last time.
yeah. It's crazy, Even like the hawkers, they're showing this disparity on the hawker level already, Like
Yeah.
and like the life in KL is so chaotic. You have to go through floods, traffic jams, and then when there's chicken shortage, everyone floods to the supermarket. It's difficult, Everything's a competition. Like even if you're not in a rush to go buy chicken, that day you happen to do to be doing your groceries. You go to a grocery store with nothing in it. It's sad, It's damn depressing to live in KL sometimes. When I think about it. But yeah, of
Uh,
course, you have like the city life. It's fun. You go out for drinks, but that's not to say like in other states, you don't have this kind of like fancy stuff. Also, there is in Penang. I would say in Penang, the living standards there is quite high also. But you can get like a KL level kind of like life. But
you can scale lah. I think that's a very good skill. Like if you live in Penang, you can live all the way to very like simple life, all the way to scaling up to like KL life. I always think there's a range in places like Penang. Around APEC. There's always a very huge skill, and you can actually decide what type of life you want to stay.
And the best part is if you're working remotely, right? You can just work from your apartment. You don't need to go out. Your expenses are just generally lower. You pay for internet in KL. You also pay for internet wherever you live in because you're gonna do remote work, right?
Yep. So, like coming back to the real estate, why I think is it important? It's very simple because I would say that where you choose to live becomes a huge part of your standard of living, right? Because end of the day, if you choose a country, right, let's say a very high expense country, right, I think Singapore is a very good example where your rent is like increasing astronomically, right? But then it doesn't really correlate with your income.
Yeah.
The question is, do you really still want to, continue living in that country where basically, that's it becomes a very like scarcity driven mindset, right? Because if you are in a country, I mean, we're not as bad as Hong Kong. Hong Kong is like seriously like sibei jialat. Like, I mean, they say Singapore apartments are small. They've never been to Hong Kong. Hong Kong for the price, I don't know. Maybe they give you a cage to live in. I don't know. It's really very bad. Like sometimes you go and see like the apartments in Hong Kong. Really, I don't know how the people there can like. If I was there, I tell you, I would have moved out long ago. I probably wouldn't like continue to stay there, lah. And that's like a very good question to ask, lah. And that is continue living in a place where the primary mover of decisions is coming from scarcity, or do you want to go to a place where there are possibilities, right? So I mean, this really stems from the remote working concept, which I'm a huge like person to advocate for, because when you decide to like in the next 5, it will not be immediate. Maybe if you can like sit down and decide, right, maybe for the next 5 years that you start to move online, you will realize very quickly that your options, right, you are no longer tied to an option of just staying in one location, the physical location, let's say in like places like Singapore and KL, because you'll start to realize, okay, now that my income is online, I can be anywhere in the world. Then the next question comes to, where do you want to be, right? Because when you ask that question, right, then you will start to realize, wow, now the option is no longer this country. Now my options is the entire world.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you come from that perspective, then suddenly, right, real estate no longer becomes so scarce anymore, because you are no longer competing against people in KL. You're no longer competing against people in Singapore, right? You're competing against the entire world. And then if you are a person who have traveled around the world, you traveled long enough, you stayed around the world long enough, you're going to realize, right, that there is more than enough land, property, and real estate, right, to house everyone. All right,
Yeah.
I give you a very simple example. The country, right, who has the largest number of population in the world, the fucking housing market can crash. For the country with the most number of people. All right, do you honestly believe that we don't have enough houses for everyone in the
Yeah,
world?
exactly.
right? I mean, like you think about it from this perspective, right? It kind of really tells you that housing is quite a rigged game. It's pretty much like artificial scarcity,
It is
right?
artificial scarcity, lah. Let
Right.
me just
So
put it this way, lah. Like, just in the context of Malaysia, to me, lah, at least, because I come from like a construction background, lah. So what I see is this: real estate, right, is a game played between the developer, the contractor that builds the construction, and lastly, the people who actually, the suckers who buy it. The real alpha in real estate is done by developing the place, and then they sell it off to you with like an extremely high margin. It's insane, the kind of margins they are earning. That is where the actual alpha is. They pass it on to you for like what, 2x over 10 years.
Yep.
So like that. This is kind of like why like Aaron mentions this now. A housing market in like where the population is the largest in the world still can crash. It's because of like artificial scarcity. Pricing is all artificial. If you go read their statements, you would actually know that the margins they're earning is actually insane. Some of the public listed companies, at least in Malaysia, you can go and look it up.
So, and I also like to say that it's a very important thing that I think young adults need to really focus their attention on, is because when you decide to make the decision to, let's say, buy a house, it's not a simple concept as buying stocks and shares, because effectively when you make a decision to buy a house, you are paying it with your current cash and your future income. And essentially, you are basically telling yourself, it's okay, I will be a slave for the next 25 years of my life.
Oh, 35 years in Malaysia. Yeah, that's the standard.
Malaysia, right? So, I mean, when you make this decision now, you really have to really sit down and ask yourself whether or not is it worth the trade-off. And I think this is something that most young adults really don't put enough conscious effort to make a decision, to think far ahead enough. Because 35 years is a very, very long time, and it's a very big decision that you're making to lock up sometimes 30-40% of your incoming income, right? And lock it up and then deciding to stay in this same country for the next 35 years of your life. So that's something which I think that most people should really put in a lot more attention to, and not just decide because it is a decision out of convenience, right? I always think that when it comes to things like real estate, right, things like property, you should make decisions that is very conscious and not something which is done out of convenience. Just because this is the natural status quo means that you go and do it, right? End of the day, if you want, I would say that every single big decision like this, right, you really need to take a step back and really like assess the opportunity cost. Right,
that's the word, opportunity cost and time in general. Because what you're investing in real estate, right, is like what Aaron said, is your future cash flow. You're basically paying with time that like you don't have, So you're literally locking yourself up to be a slave to your own property, and locking yourself out of like the options of like, let's say if you're renting, right, you can always go to another country and rent, but the moment you put down the deposit for the house, you're locked in that country forever.
Unless you sell it, lah. But the problem is whether or not you can sell, right? There have been many reports of like saying like the real estate prices are up, but I'm not sure what are the statistics that the sales are going through, right? Like in Singapore, so far the real estate sales are going very fast because there has been artificial scarcity due to COVID, right? Not enough houses are built, houses are being delayed. So obviously people, especially during COVID, the people who want to retire for so long, right, they stay in private. So they decide to sell the private, cash in on private, then downgrade. That's why you see like increase in property. But end of the day, the one who really suffers are the people who just start work because they don't have $1 million at the age of 22 to put down on a house, obviously. Right. So then as a young person who's 22, if I was in his shoes, right, the question I need to ask is, right, do I want to spend $1 million to stay in this country? I mean, is this country really that worth it? Right. That's a question that I would ask myself. Then obviously, if I can see a way or a career path, right, that makes that $1 million worth it, then of course I'll pay for it, But I would very much argue, like, for $1 million, you can definitely find, right, a place elsewhere, right, that gives you way more than that, I would say. Because really, if you really think about it, right, the great thing about ASEAN citizens is that you belong in a very multiple cultural region, right, where I would say that, most people over here can be, like when I go around APAC, people always think I'm a local. because I think I speak enough language on most APAC regions to disguise myself as a local. So sometimes when I go to Malaysia, they'll think I'm Malaysian. Sometimes when I go to Thailand, they'll think I'm Thai, right? So it's like I'm like racially ambiguous, right? So I think that's one of the great things about being like in APAC, right? Because I think if you speak the language a little bit, right, then you go around, people will just sort of like don't think that you're Singaporean. Actually, it's quite blurred. The lines are quite blurred, right? So I think that's one of the huge benefits. So I think when you come across that question, you really do have to ask yourself seriously, right, whether or not you want to do that, and then also the point of entry, right, the age of early 20s, to make a decision to buy a real estate for 35 years. By the time you're done finishing paying that, right, in Malaysia 22 you finish paying at 57. Yeah,
you can 3 more years can retire already. Hello.
Yeah, 57. You finish paying at 57. So that is a huge decision that I think people shouldn't take lightly. And decide just because a parent said so, or because your friends are doing it. Things like that. That's something which you really need to really sit down and ask yourself whether or not, at least for the prime working years of your life, whether or not this is the place that you want to root yourself in. I think that's the key, because I when I did my numbers, I realized very quickly, right, it's not that I don't want to root myself in Singapore. I want to, but I just don't have to do it now.
Yeah, you can do it later in life. No issue.
Yeah, because the truth of the matter is, if you actually take a very active and conscious approach to your personal finance, right, actually buying a house, right, is not really a need. It's a nice to do, but it's not really a need, because if you really plan your finances properly, right, and if you are very prudent in your investing journey, right, actually, if you drag your old 35 years, you should actually do better than a person who buy a house.
Here's a fun fact that I just realized. Renting versus like buying a house when you're in your 20s, right? Like I feel like the most people who are afraid to rent forever, they are scared that they cannot find a house to rent when their current house, the current tenant kicks them out. So it's like, this is like scarcity mindset. You have to believe like there's more than enough property that fits your criteria for you to rent out there. That's really an abundance of options out there. You don't want to live in this neighborhood, you can go somewhere else. Worst case scenario, if you cannot find in KL, go to Penang. Can't find in Malaysia, you go to Thailand.
I would say you definitely can find one. I've never been in a situation where I want to rent or want to stay in a place for months on end. I cannot find a place.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, nowadays with Airbnb, with like online leasing, right, you can basically like connect to a person. You don't even understand the language. I can just use Google Translate and have a decent conversation with them. You can even like get referrals online. There's so many people overseas, they're more than willing to help you find a place to stay, right? So I think like this is where people need to really really start to look at things in a more like global scale, right, and not restrict themselves to just local living, because I mean, unless of course you're very certain that that's your family is there, you want to see your parents, etc., right? Obviously that's okay, but even that by itself, Malaysia is a very big country, right? You have many towns, not just KL, right? I think in the next 5 years it will be quite wise for people to actually start to think about whether or not is it possible for them to earn a first world income, preferably in US dollar, while living anywhere in Malaysia. I think that's something which people need to like really put active attention on, right? And then finding a solution to this problem. Because you know what, guys? I've been traveling around APAC. I have friends in Indonesia. I have friends in KL. I have friends in Thailand. Not all of them speak perfect English, but I can definitely find a few friends who have solved that problem already. And this is only 2022. And they no longer have to slog it out in work. I have friends who can work like 3 days a week, right, from the comfort of their own home, and they're already earning more than what fresh grad pay in Singapore.
And they're in fair advantage, man, really.
Yeah, precisely. And so I mean, when I give this type of stories, right, these are real case examples of people who have solved that problem. So I think like end of the day, right, you need to be able to like believe that this can be a reality and then work towards it and give yourself 5 years, because I think in 5 years time, right, if you have not started your journey today, I think you'll be late. Because I think by then, it will become a red ocean. Because right now, from the way I see it, this is a blue ocean. Because a lot of people don't believe in it. Therefore, it's good for you to start to think about it.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I mean that actually like ties into the third one, which is also career, you know. I think we sort of like deviated towards like from real estate to stocks because all these are so like interconnected, right? So maybe the next thing, apart from, because we've been talking about a lot of possibilities, right? I think the good question to ask, right, Ryan, is, you know, a lot of this really stems from optimism, but the question is, how do you actually prevent too much optimism? Because I think that can also be a problem. If you are too like gung-ho about the potential of things, then you suddenly decide to buy Luna. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, but yeah, that's the thing, you know. It reflects as this kind of like I like to call it blind faith and blind optimism. It reflects itself in investing a lot. That's why you see people saying like Jamie's gonna go to the moon and all that, because like yeah, you know, it's just blind faith. There's no fundamental thesis to back it up. So I would say like how to prevent too much optimism is to keep yourself grounded with facts. Always fact check whether your investment thesis is actually that great. Even if it is, don't let it get to your head. Don't develop an ego over it. Always be grateful that your stocks are performing and you don't get liquidated in the world of crypto. You know, that's in a nutshell, it's kind of like prepare for the worst, hope for the best. It's not wrong to hope for the best. Like I would say, like even like to hope for the best and kind of like dream of like a 10x, right? You have to believe it in order to actually achieve it. But it will start to hurt your performance when you stop looking at what's the actual facts are. So like let's say you have say like maybe in an alternate world, right? Tesla is actually not making that much money, not growing as much because of inflation. So this is a time to actually reconsider and be critical, practice a little bit of like healthy skepticism. And, you know, this is the part where like scarcity will come in. So like you need to have like a nice balance between scarcity, which promotes healthy skepticism. But you have to keep it at a healthy level. Don't like go full on like paranoid. Skeptical to the point. Paranoid, yes, to the point it becomes you become paranoid. Then you don't dare to invest. You hoard cash, and then your cash is gonna devalue over the next 70 years to oblivion. Yep. So you always have to like have a nice balance, like yin and yang, skepticism, and a bit of like optimism. You have to have a bit of abundance, a bit of scarcity. Because if you like, to give you one very good example, if you don't understand scarcity, right, you will not understand Bitcoin. Because the thesis of Bitcoin is very simple. There's only 21 million Bitcoins up there. Buy it while you can. That's skepticism in a nutshell, you know? Yep. So like, but of course, optimism, you have to believe in like certain crypto projects that they actually have the potential. You have to go and like do a due diligence, read the white paper, understand what they are selling, the consensus mechanism, go check out, like, because it's crypto, it's open source, you know, you can actually tap into on-chain metrics like the user growth, wallet address number growth, you know, all that stuff. You have to fact check. Practice a bit of healthy skepticism. Don't let people tell you where it's actually going. Don't let salesmen sell you the dream. Go check it out yourself. And that's how I think we can prevent too much optimism. Because too much optimism, it goes beyond believing abundance today. It's called being stupid if there's too much optimism.
Yeah, I believe the term for it is called degen.
Yes. Yeah, the Gen Z lingo, degen, yes.
Yeah, degen. So I think obviously we've seen a lot of examples of this in the last month, especially during the crypto drawdown, you know, where people realizes when dream is built on sandcastles, right, then essentially a wave comes and then everybody dies and get washed out. So I think this is something which is very important for people to always come back to, and that is to ask the fundamental question, why will this idea work out in the next 5 to 10 years, and what are the key metrics for you to keep tab on, right, that this will continue to work out, and what is the execution cues, right? So a very good example that I can use is maybe I can use Tesla versus the other EV manufacturers, right? So the way that I keep myself away from being too optimistic is basically just to see whether or not the story will continue to play out in Tesla. All right, because every single time I buy a growth stock, I always tell myself, okay, in 3 years, right, I just don't expect to make money for the first 3 years, because I feel that for most growth stocks, unless you have like a 2020 moment, right, most of the time you tend to overpay for growth stocks, and that is something that I have to live with. And that is the moment I buy into a growth stock, I just expect to not make money for the first 3 years. And in fact, I actually believe that maybe my timing is shit, and I just expect, a drawdown of 50%. That's the way I view buying that investment, because I have accepted the fact that I cannot time the bottom, and I've accepted the fact that I might be able to make mistakes. So this is how I anchor myself to basically give myself some room for error, that I've made some mistakes, right? And if I can overcome that mistake, right, if I can bring myself to mentally accept that, then okay, after the 3 years, what are the key metrics in the next 3 years that I need to see that this idea is performing, right? So that's the type of risk that I'm willing to put my money down, all right, and then expect to make mistakes. All right, now that I've accepted that I can make mistakes, right, the way that I prevent too much optimism is to look for key indicators that this company is performing. So for things like Tesla, right, they need to show consistently that they're able to grow their revenue, and they did show that they grow by 50%. Then on the same time, also what I would like to see if it's an operational company like Tesla, right, it's like, for example, the China shutdown. All right, I want to see how they're able to navigate around this shutdown. Can they continue to execute despite the issues that they have in China? And apparently they did. They did manage to execute. So it tells me that this idea, right, is basically run by a very competent management team who knows what they're doing, and they are continuing to execute. So what is the right move after I've deduced from that? Basically, because I've been watching them, right, the right thing is to basically ask, how long can they sustain this, right? And then the question, the thing that I always go back to Tesla, right, is that their goal by 2030, right, early 2030, 35 is to hit 20 million cars in production, right? Today, I think they can hit about conservatively 1 million. So that means their revenue, right, today, right, is based on 1 million cars. In 10 to 15 years, they want to 20x that. That is a revenue multiplier of 20 times, right? Game over. Why do I need to think? Why do I need to do value investing?
Just check that they execute, and then you do simple math for me.
Yeah, and I just like wait and shake my leg until they hit 20 million cars. So it's like, if, for example, if let's say the revenue potential is 20 million cars, then I go and fact check, right? That basically last year, the development of cars being sold around the world is, let's say, about 100 million, right? That is 20% of the global market share. My question I need to ask, do I think that Tesla can be the Apple of cars? I think they can, right? Because they have shown very similar traits as Apple. They have a very good CEO, all right? Sometimes they're a bit loud, he cannot shut up, but it's okay. That is the cause of eccentricism, right?
Yes.
And then they have already like shown that they can execute. So that is why I put my money in Tesla, because I don't want to be too optimistic. But then when I see that the materialism, when I go through that thought process, it becomes a very simple way to check. So I know I'm not like, people like Dave Lee, check, go and they'll do the numbers so like intensely, like scrutinize the Q reward. I basically just the way I do my research is think of a very broad story, right? And then every quarter you need to fact check to see whether or not are they executing. Because if they are executing, right, then I know based on that, right, that the story is still intact, right? The one that maybe for example, the story might not be intact. It's usually during like Black Swan. Maybe Elon Musk dies, right?
Yeah.
Or suddenly, I don't know, a factory suddenly have to shut down for like 1 year or something like that. Then that's a red flag to me. It means they're not executing. But so far from what I see, they're executing. So another way I give you an example is in the crypto space, right? How do you prevent too much optimism? It's very simple. When you assess a project, let's say for example, Luna, right? You have to really ask the question like, is this system that they designed, is it flawed or not? And the fact of the matter is, if you have really like sit down and do your due diligence, me and Ryan, right, before this shitstorm occurred, right, both of us have already warned people that DeFi, right, the likelihood that projects can go to zero is there. And I don't think most people agree with us.
Yeah.
Right? Because
that's-
both of us are release articles. You can check out. We release articles on Instagram warning people that DeFi can go to zero. That is the maximum you can lose. 100%. Right? And nobody believe us. Right? Until like the last like 2 months where this shitstorm occurred. Right? Even if we put money inside DeFi, we also did mention to people we don't put in 100%. We at most only put around 5 or at most 10%. Right?
I put just 1%.
Yeah, precisely. So like to prevent the to prevent this optimism, it's always good to basically just go back and fact check whether or not is this system sustainable, right? So and if you are not sure, perhaps the wise thing to do is to start building a position from a small position. You start at 1%, like what Ryan did, right? After you put in 1%, if you see what you like, then you can put in more over time. But then it does not mean that you don't actually fact check over time, because if you, of course they say hindsight is 2020, but essentially the way that I try to prevent too much optimism is I go online and I search for interviews with CEOs of the project. All right, that's what I do. Right, because listening to the CEO will tell you a lot about
where the company is,
or where or what is the company culture. Because if the CEO is basically answering questions, right? By not answering questions, right? Or taking a podcast and talk 5 hours and don't say anything, there's a red flag. Because if even the CEO cannot explain to you what the fuck they are doing, right? I think you don't need to bother to talk to people who are inside the company. Because the CEO, right, if he himself cannot have a very clear direction, then I think forget it. It means the people over there are also like also running around blind. Right?
To put it simply, if you cannot explain the thing in one sentence where it's simple enough, people can get it straight away, right? Then you better not bother with the company.
Yeah, because I think end of the day, very good ideas are ideas which you can explain very simply. Even the 12-year-old can understand. Like I give you a very good example. You give a 12-year-old a Tesla car and ask him, Aboya, you think in this 10 years, this company will do well or not? I think the child should be able to tell you, no? Right? Because
they will like the car.
Yeah, if you give a child iPhone 10 years ago and ask him, right? You give a child 10 years ago, you give him an iPhone versus, let's say, a Sony Ericsson phone. You ask him, which phone do you think in 10 years will do better? I can bet you 10 times out of 10, every single one of them will point to the iPhone. Agree?
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. You bring a Tesla car, you bring a Ford electric vehicle, you ask the child which one will do better. You know why? Because they are the future customers.
Exactly.
Right? So you want to know what's the future? Ask the future.
That's the thing about like Apple and Tesla. They built like this brand loyalty from the younger generation, which is like us in our teenage years and or like when we were 12. We kind of like grew up with this stuff. It's fun, we grew up with it. And then kids nowadays, they would enjoy riding in a Tesla. They would think like the wing doors opening is so cool. They would also think like you can play games on the screen. That's also cool. A lot of fun stuff going on. Like TikTok videos okay. Nowadays kids are all into TikTok, right? So I would kind of like take TikTok as like an indication for like marketing. The strongest brand presence, I say, in terms of cars is Tesla. I only see Teslas and other like sort of like those sports unique race cars on TikTok. But the chances of like a mass-produced car coming out on a TikTok is more likely that it's Tesla more than other cars.
Yep.
And nowadays like teens, right? They think that other cars are lame already. Tesla is cool.
Yeah, and as they say, usually if the kids start to think they're cool, then usually that coolness factor also end of the day trickles to the mass consumer.
Yes.
Right. So I think there's also something which I also like to test on, right? Which is why it always, even when you go back to crypto, right? When you talk about Bitcoin versus the traditional financial system, right? I think most kids, if you talk to them about crypto and versus about the traditional finance system, I think you will start to realize that most of them are more interested inside the crypto projects, right? Because this is where one of the ways where I can like really see whether or not I'm good at my investing is that I try to explain it to my kids my niece and nephews. I ask them, I talk to them, then if they can understand me, it means okay, roughly I understand that I know this idea quite well. That's one way to like go around doing it and also is to really like reality check for myself whether or not is it too much optimism. Because on the other hand, you also have to realize, right, that the reason why a lot of these DeFi projects I'm a bit like on the equation is very simple. You know why? Because what's the premise? The premise, you put in the money, you don't have to work. You get
Yeah,
what I mean?
they promise limitless what do you call that? Yields, yields
Yeah,
that come from
so
nowhere.
yeah, so it's like it's quite hilarious to think that the entire education system have based on the premise that in order for you to get something you need to work. Then they basically go to La La Land where you basically don't have to work and you get everything. Like even people who do real estate investing know that the rental monthly the income also is not free. They also have to put in effort to find tenants, make the place nice. That's why they earn their rental yield lah. You get what I mean? Then the problem is that and then even Bitcoin by itself, the scarcity aspect, I will say that the way I see it is that it's just digital property, right? Because it's just the reason why I like Bitcoin is not because it's scarce, but I just see it's just a superior store of value compared to overpriced properties around the world, which is driven by artificial scarcity, right? And if artificial scarcity is what you really want, then Bitcoin is the perfect replacement for that. That's why I believe in the future, because I feel that the faster that the world moves to a thing, right, which is just more efficient at keeping value, then basically it opens up a whole lot of opportunities, right, for people to basically be more efficient in the way that they spend their cash flow, right? Because if you take away the alpha from artificial scarcity in property, the rental yields and the prices of property will drop, and when this thing starts to drop, money can flow to places which can be better utilized, right? And then basically capitalism, right? If companies are basically allowed to go bankrupt, then people will just be more prudent in the way that they use their capital, right? So I think like this is why when you hear us talk about our ideas and our investment ideas, you realize that it doesn't come from optimism, because we really go down to the fundamental question: how does this idea work out in the next 5-10 years? And then we actually do acutely take in notes, like whether or not the idea is executing, right? So we are not by any nature bone boys, we are not degens, because we really do a lot of research and really do ask the questions. And of course, I think one of the key things, right, to prevent too much optimism, right, criticism, and also to study them. There is a very fine line between a person who's toxic and a person who's coming up with a good question, right? A person who's toxic, right, usually comes from a standpoint, right, from ignorance. Usually they have not done their homework, and a lot of their arguments, right, basically they didn't do any research and they want to be spoon-fed the answers. And usually this type of comments, I just don't bother, because from the question I know, I've listened to enough objections to know that this person didn't do his homework. So usually these are the questions I ignore. But the ones which are very good questions, right, are usually questions which are very original. They really put in a lot of thought process into it, and sometimes they might be even a technical question, and they ask a very simple question to a very complicated answer, right? So these are the ones which I find that will sort of limit the optimism, because too much optimism, you become a degen. But you still need optimism, because that allows you to grow, but not too much that you become basically a person who basically just don't do research, because you want to avoid a situation like Three Arrows Capital. You want to avoid a situation like Celsius. You want to avoid a situation like Luna.
Yes.
Right. And then the solution is not really diversification. Actually, that is not the right answer. You only Warren Buffett likes to say diversification is for idiots, and that is true. Right? It is really for idiots. So honestly, sometimes when you feel yourself like you're being an idiot, right, the answer to that is just diversify, right? The worst part, right, is that you don't admit you're an idiot. You think you're very smart, right? Then you go all in. Then what happens? You get screwed.
Yeah, I like how you said, if you feel you're being an idiot, then you diversify. That's kind of like how we generally think about diversification. Because when we are investing into high risk assets, this DeFi, some of the moonshot coins, some of the moonshot companies, where their technology is brand new, and but they're still very small. There's proof of concept, but no proof of scale, that kind of stuff, right? You keep your position small and you diversify across them. For a chance that one of them can go 100x, right? Then you can cover the losses for the other investments that sunk. You get what I mean? So that's how I see about it. It's kind of like diversification is a shield for being ignorant. But there are some things that you can educate yourself with. Like if you diversify across 500 different companies with the S&P 500, that's being ignorant, because there's so many companies out there that's really great. And it's not hard to find. You just have to sit down and actually look around what people are buying. Sometimes, do your research just a bit. But when it comes to these high risk assets, where the information is so scarce on them, you don't even know what the technology can actually do, or you don't know like this new consensus mechanism, how effective it is, you're just taking a shot in the dark, right? Then yes, you better go and diversify. But like at things where you can kind of like not to say control, but you have like a better idea on, where you have more information to work with and you can safely deduce a proper conclusion, then it's better to just concentrate.
Yep, I agree. So I would say the end of this like particular topic is that, guys, I think it's important that you set up a certain level of metrics where you can assess yourself, right? Whether or not the idea that you're doing is a valid one. So like there needs to be some like fact check that is working, because if you have that, right, then at least you give yourself a level of like a protection, right, that you can always go back to see whether or not your story has changed. And the important thing is to write it down and make sure you don't move the goalpost, because I think a lot of people sometimes they move the goalpost, they basically delude themselves to thinking this idea will work, when actually like 3 months ago the thesis was different. So I think that's a very good way to fact check, write it down. So moving on to the next topic, which is scarcity and abundance, right? I think this is something which is very important for most people to talk about, and that comes with the relationships with people, right? Because when you run your life through a scarcity and abundance mindset, right, it really does affect your relationships with people around you, specifically loved ones. So maybe Ryan, would you like to chime in on this?
Yeah, I would say like from my personal experience, right? I like to tackle this from like a more personal finance kind of angle. Because like when I was just starting out in like work, right, I didn't have a lot to my name. So it was always about saving money so I can one day invest. I can't even afford to invest at that point of time, just barely surviving, hanging on. So I don't really have a lot to enjoy life with. And I'm really grateful that like my girlfriend is still with me today, because of like what I put her through. Basically, it's like I had to save a lot of money, so we didn't have like a lot of money to actually go and enjoy. So it's always like cooking at home, be it like whether it's like actually good food or not. It's a lot of suffering, and sometimes, right, when I think about it today, it's okay that I suffer alone. It's not so bad because the suffering stops within me. I don't spread it to other people, but it's not okay when this kind of like scarcity, you try to force it on other people. You affect other people's life. That's where it becomes extremely toxic, because you impose your own views that are born from scarcity on other people. So it becomes in the form of like relationships, right? Like boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife relationships. It becomes extremely toxic to the point like say the person who controls the finances, right? There's always like one or the other who does more or rather, if you do it on like a 50-50 basis, that's good on you guys. But in my relationship, I do the finances a bit more. So I have like the more say and then it becomes extremely toxic when like say like I'm not up for like an expensive meal or like a night out with cocktails and beer, then but the other person wants it, and then it ends up in an argument. But realistically speaking, it's not going to blow a hole in the budget. It's okay to actually slow down a bit and like go enjoy, stop and like spend time with your loved ones, and even like outside of this love relationship context, right? Even with your own immediate family, sometimes it can also be hard. If like let's say you are so like cheapskate to the point you cannot pay your parents like a monthly allowance, or like you still stay with your parents but you don't pay them something, right, just for the food and like say like rental whatnot, then your parents may start feeling you're freeloading them. But of course parents don't feel that way. But like, don't you feel ashamed of yourself for being like someone in the workforce, but you still cannot pay your parents an allowance so that they don't have to rely on their savings to go and buy food to cook for you when you come back home from work, right? So like, it's okay if you kind of like save money, but don't go too extreme to the point where you start to degrade yourself. and then it will start hurting people around you. So that's how, personally how I see like scarcity destroy people. But on the other hand, if you believe in abundance, right, then you fundamentally believe that you can always earn money. Earning money is not hard. You can always earn money. There are a lot of ways to earn money. You just have to be patient enough, and it's okay to actually slow down and spend a bit sometimes.
Yep.
So you become more generous in general. And when you become more generous, you give. People also give back. So it's like an upward spiral, and it promotes a lot of like positive feelings, emotions, and then you foster good relationships, and good relationship will in turn power you to do better in your life, your career, and all that. And it's just, and it keeps going on and on. So yeah, that's why that abundance is kind of important in this context.
I like what you say about when basically if you basically suffer by yourself, I think that's okay. But when you start to basically take other people around you for granted, they'll put up with your behavior, then that becomes a problem. Because I think that's something which people who have scarcity mindset should be quite wary lah. Because I think also I agree, I share quite similar sentiments, right? Because when I first came out, also I was very hard on myself. Generally I don't spend a lot, then I'm also very 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 hard on myself. I always I tend not drink, not party, not do any of that, and I basically dedicated a huge part of my 20s basically just working and working and working, right? So for me to get into a relationship, that was a huge learning curve that I had to overcome. I basically need to know how to basically not hold the other party to the same standards as myself.
Yeah.
That's something which is very, very difficult, I find. And it reflects a lot about experience lah. So obviously, that comes with a lot of learning and a lot of reverse engineering to tell yourself, right, that you probably shouldn't, if you want to have a very fulfilling relationship, right, that you need to be open to change in terms of the way that you utilize money lah. Because, I think in terms of most relationships, I would say that you need to always have a person who have a healthy balance between abundance, and also obviously need to save for the future lah, because you cannot always be 100% abundance optimistic, then you degen inside a stupid idea, right? So I think it needs to have a very good balance. So usually in a relationship, usually there's always a person in a couple, right? There's always a person who likes to think about the future. There's always a person who likes to think about defense. There's always an offense and defense strategy lah, and it all comes down to the couples. What are their goals for the next 5, 10, 15 years? Because end of the day, the most successful couples I've noticed tend to be couples who know how to sit down and really talk about the future, right? Because essentially their goals are quite aligned, and then they both work towards it. And I think that is something which, if you are in a relationship, that's something you need to do as a couple. And then periodically, of course, if you have disagreements, right, then the communication is very important, because you need to really sit down and then talk to your partner, right? Then talk it out lah, because silent treatment does not solve anything except build resentment, right? End of the day, nothing gets done when you do that. You really need to really sit down and basically revisit your goals. Making a goal one time is not enough, because just discipline, going to a gym, you need to always reaffirm that both of you are in the same boat and both of you are in the same team, right? And both of you need to always sit down and talk about it, because that's how you both grow as people, and that's how you grow in your relationships. Right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget relationships, right? You cannot just achieve goals by yourself. It's a two-way thing. You have to communicate. You have to work together. It's an interdependent thing. You cannot achieve it alone. No matter how successful you are, right? If the moment the other party decides to leave the relationship, then you fail.
Yep.
50% of your performance not to say performance, 50% of the fate of a relationship lies on each other's hands. So you have to talk it out. Silent treatment, like what Aaron said, it's not going to get you anywhere. It's just running away from the problem. So you have to face the problem, just sit down, talk about it. I think money is a very sensitive topic to talk about for between couples sometimes.
And
It is quite hard.
And it stems from beliefs, right? Because it really believes what type of belief are you? Do you have an abundance type of mindset, or do you have a scarcity driven type of mindset? Because if you are a person who's driven by scarcity, and if you pair yourself with a person who has a mindset of abundance, it's going to be very difficult for a person of scarcity to understand abundance, and it's going to be equally difficult for the person with an abundance mindset to understand a person with scarcity, because this is what you call clash of culture, right? So how do you solve this problem? It's very simple. Both parties need to come to an understanding, right? Why each other is feeling that way. Because essentially, most what I've noticed is that people will tend to come to equal and common ground, right? That both are equally important. Because usually the person who comes from scarcity worries about not enough for the future. Then the person who thinks of abundance is worrying, right, that tomorrow she'll die. So it's I think there needs to be a healthy balance because both parties are right. Because if you are always very scared about spending money, then what happens if you drop it tomorrow? Then you live life without really living, right?
Yeah.
Right. So I think apart from just money itself, I think the other currency which most people with scarcity driven mindset don't think about is that time is also money. You're only 27 and 65 days one time in your life, Do you realize that? Tomorrow you wake up, you're already 26, 27 and 67 days old. And that is only once in your life you're ever going to live in that moment. So I think sometimes people need to be kinder to themselves, because for me, it took me a very long time before I started being kind to myself and started to be more be not so uptight because I think that stems from habit, right? And then it took a very long time to break that habit. But of course, I don't do it in too much excess obviously still do it within reason. Then I think if you're able to balance that, right, then I think that is okay for relationships. And this is not just relationships with your partner. This can also be relationships with the people that you work with. All right, this can be relationships with people like your parents, because all this, right, is very important. Because or similarly to some parents also have abundance mindset, but the children don't have, right?
Wow, still got cases like that.
Yeah. I'm living in one. All right. But it took me a very long time to overcome that mental block that I have, because I'm naturally a person who is born with needing to protect something, so I'm scarcity. So it took me a very long time before I accepted the abundance mindset, So obviously, but my life has been a lot better since then. So now I'm more more daring to basically go forth and just take risks, So when I was first out, because I want to get there as quickly as possible, right? So the way I do is I sacrifice a lot. But then I realized that, life is short. People have limited time on earth, and sometimes the best thing you can do is not be so hard on yourself and the people around you, because you'll never know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's why you need to also be quite flexible in the way that you approach things, but of course within reason, right? And then what I also noticed while traveling around APEC post-COVID is also that also be very grateful with your life, because I don't think people give themselves enough credit on how lucky they are, because there's always someone else, right, out there who will be very willing to trade places with you.
Yeah, ovarian lottery, basically.
Yeah, it's an ovarian lottery thing. So whenever I go to APEC, I look at the people around me. It really gives me a lot of things to think about, and become a lot more grateful whenever I see people, even normal hawkers, things like that. I tell myself I am damn lucky. I am a very lucky person, and also I also should be happier, because these people are usually, even if they don't have much, usually they are also happier than people who have 10 times, 100 times more back in Singapore, right? Singaporeans, we are very lucky to be, currency is stable, income is pretty much on a higher end compared to APEC. But that is one thing I realized, is that because the society there is quite driven by scarcity, right? That a lot of the people over there are not happy. They always feel there's a sense of scarcity of time and space. And
not enough.
It's
always
really
not enough.
Which is weird, because they earn so much more. They can earn 10 times, 100 times more, right? But they never feel that time is enough, space isn't. And that is something which you don't really understand until you go to APEC countries, and then you jump around, then you live long enough, right? Then you realize that the culture difference is very, very big. Yeah, so I think that's why
that's something to think about lah. Singaporeans, the culture can be quite competitive, right? But then you don't really realize how big of a difference that is until you go abroad. Then you talk to people, then you like observe things, be a conscious observer, right? Then you really realize that the difference can be quite contrasting lah. Right, so so it's very difficult for you to go from scarcity to abundance. But the moment you cross that bridge, right, then I would say that your life becomes a lot better. It becomes a lot easier to live life. Life is not that difficult.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's the next one is basically like the last one, which I think is the hard one and something which I have not addressed. And that is, how do you train yourself towards an abundance mindset?
Oh, this one's hard.
Yeah,
but
it's hard.
like what we discussed just now, right? You can start with reading books, books about philosophy, psychology, and self-help books. I generally recommend reading. Not all self-help books are great. I generally try to recommend reading there's this book called Courage to be Disliked, and its sequel, Courage to be Happy. So it's basically a book written in a very stoic way, which is recorded in a very dialogue form. So it's a conversation between a Zen master and a very troubled teacher. So they go back and forth arguing with psychological facts and also philosophy like Stoicism, Zen Buddhism. So in the end, and the Zen master will answer with very provocatively and in very challenging ways, which will open your mind. So I generally will recommend anyone to read that series. And there's another one. If you want to dive deep into philosophy, I would recommend Zen Buddhism one, and also the other one would be Stoicism from the West. So Stoicism helped me a lot, and but then it's not instant. Basically, you have to read it long enough, study it long enough until you start to see it reflecting in your life. It's not an instant thing. It's kind of like a long grind. You have to be patient with it. A lot of things a lot of those practices are during at the moment when you're practicing it doesn't really make sense, but it makes sense when you look back, and you will thank yourself for actually conducting yourself that specific way. Like, let's say when you're angry, right, you try not to say anything, try not to do anything, keep quiet. At that point of time, you feel like you feel like water boiling over. You want to explode on someone, but then if after a couple of hours you look back, you'll be thanking yourself for not actually causing a conflict and all that. But the point is these self-help books, it's not instant. It's not like an instant solution, and you have to read it, understand it, and try to incorporate it into your life. It's a very long grind. It took me 5 years to fully understand some of the concepts, and I believe I still don't even understand all of them yet. Especially Stoicism, I can't control my anger that well these days. But it's still a work in progress. It takes a long time. But in terms of scarcity and abundance, all these philosophies, I think they do promote abundance in the ultimate grand scheme of things.
I like that because whatever that you have mentioned, I've also done it for myself, which is I would say that broadly most people usually get started usually two ways, philosophy and religion, right? Because you realize that most religions in the world do practice that abundance mindset, because whenever you go inside a religious gathering, I would say most of the time will basically advocate everyone is equal, right?
And that it's all about giving, That's sharing and giving.
Yes, testament, sharing, giving. And also inculcate a sense of being grateful and counting your blessings.
Yes.
Right. This is what really a lot of core religions they like to teach, and that is to be grateful for things around you. And no matter where you are, you must understand that there's always people around who wishes to trade positions with you. So but the easy thing is to really, I think the hard part is to really practice it, because things even for things that you mentioned, things like anger, all this, right? Even like for myself, I think most people should know I do have difficulty controlling that, especially all right, especially when
when things that need to be said, right, people don't dare to say, I will say it. I don't really have a filter because I think end of the day, the truth is better than bullshit lah. Right, I call it like it is. That's who I am as a person. I don't like to tread water in terms of like trying to be diplomatic, because sometimes I think being diplomatic don't really achieve anything. Right, so that's the way I decide to live my life. But I'm trying my best to basically like tone it down. But sometimes I don't know whether that's the right way, so sometimes I'm conflicted. So sometimes when I post stuff like that, I also go back and ask myself, did I do the right thing? Did I not do the right thing? But then I always come to a conclusion, if I didn't do it, I would have regretted it. So it doesn't matter, right? I think end of the day, I think it comes back to like the spirit of what you're doing. Like if you do it for good intentions, if you do it because at a core, right, like you believe that is basically to help people, I think that's okay, right? But if you do it out of spite, right, then that is a problem, I find, right? So I think really the intention is important when you do things like that. But obviously there's ways to handle it better, right? But I know it's a chicken and egg thing. I'm also a work in progress. But I would say that definitely, reading Stoicism, right? I think that's a very key factor in my life now. Has taught me that I could basically go back to my roots and live life with less, right? And I don't need so much to like live a good life, and also basically like, things are a lot less, definitely a lot more patient now with people around me. It's just that the usually is quite weird because now my patient level for people who come from first world country is not very high. So I sort of have a double standard, So now it's like, people who are like, hardworking, living an honest life, I'm very patient with them. I'm like super patient with them. But a person coming from first world country and has entitlement problem, I am not patient with them. I don't have filter with them because I don't know if this is like a good thing. I don't know. I have not like figured that out yet. But my gut kind of tells me that I think that is okay lah.
I think you're in the grand scheme of things. It ties back to whether you are an agreeable or non-agreeable person. Like I like to think myself as an agreeable person, and
you are.
but that doesn't really bode well with conflict and argument, which I tend to shy away from. When there's like conflict, right, I try to run away from it. But for agreeable people, right, I see like a lot of bravery in confronting things that are unjust. So like I say that it's like when there's something that's not true, there's like it sparks an argument, right? Non-agreeable people tend to be very brief in telling the truth, which I aspire to be. So like for agreeable people, right, I would say like not all times conflict is bad. Like and the guiding star to your argument, right, should be the truth. And when I look back at this, right, like all the times when I got myself into a conflict, and I spoke the truth, right, the outcome has always been positive.
True, that's true. It cannot be driven by ego lah. It needs to be driven by justice and like like the truth lah. It needs to be
not to say justice lah, like truth lah. Sometimes truth is like hard to swallow, but it is what it is. So like and like people like you are, and you are not afraid to tell the truth for the fact of what it is, and like it drives people to say things like you are heretical or you are like not normal. But it's because like these kind of truths they are hard to swallow, and it's so out far left on the field. So sometimes people can't take it. But I really appreciate like people like you for standing out and being honest about things, especially like DeFi, like all the investments ideas. Being honest is the most expensive thing that I find like in the finance world, because people are not honest in the finance world, be it like personal finance influencers or be it like fund salespeople, bankers. It's hard to come by people who are honest and actually care about your outcome in this field.
Thanks for that, Ryan. I always say that when you don't lie a lot, then you don't have to you don't have to keep track of your lies. Sometimes it's good to just like
Yeah, I think end of the day, you just need to do what you feel is right. Because I think when you start to become a person who sees the world as abundance, you start to realize that you don't really need a lot to live a happy life. And that includes you don't really need a lot of friends and connection. Because end of the day, what matters more is the quality of friends that you have, right? And that also stems from abundance, because in terms of abundance scale, right, it's unlimited, right? Versus like a shallow connection. So I think end of the day, when you focus on yourself and being a person to the best of your ability, right, then you will start to attract people who are attracted to you, and it's a win-win for both parties, right? So as content creators, I think at the end of the day, what's also more important is also you have to be honest with who you are as a person and not act like someone who you aren't, because I think that just ends up in disaster lah. Because eventually you're going to burn out.
Yeah, pretending to be someone you're not.
Yeah, so I think this how to train towards. I think like really like this abundance mindset thing is not, as Ryan says, it's not something which is overnight. You need to really practice it, and also like there's also a lot of times where we do question ourselves when we create content lah. But I think end of the day, what Ryan hit the nail on the head is it needs to stem from our gut and feel that something is right. Because I think what one of my favorite content creators is by Chris Broad abroad in Japan. I don't think many people like watch him, but basically he said one particular line which I completely agree, and he says that in the realm of social media, right, production value is not valued as much as human nature.
Yeah, it is valued based on the number of clicks that you will get.
And this number of clicks is rewarded based on human nature, right? So it's like the more you can appeal to human nature, the more successful you can become, right? But the problem is you need to be very like wary about what type of human nature you wish to put out lah. Right, because it's very easy to be led on a path, right, where you are putting up a false type of personality online.
Yeah.
Right, which is why like you see a lot of these people who portray themselves to be family men, then later to be found out they are also in the Me Too movement, right? That's why they get fucked lah. Whereas you have the issue is not that they're playboys. The issue is that they are disguising themselves as family man, but then they're the playboys. If you actually portray yourself as a playboy, and if you get found out as a playboy, nobody is going to give a shit, because it's consistent with who you are. What people are very angry with is the inconsistency.
Yeah.
So I think that is like something that people have to be very wary about, especially with like these days, social media is your brand is online, so you need to be very wary about how the way you frame yourself. I think the best way is just to be honest and upfront, and don't try to like screw people. So I think that's like the best way. So that's actually the last topic, how to train towards abundance mindset. You guys can take a read of books of what Ryan has mentioned. I think he has done a very good job in wrapping that up. So now we'll move towards the Q&A, right? We have actually pretty good questions coming from our audience this time. And the first question, right, I love this, is in an ideal world where people live in abundance, how will the economy look like?
Wow.
Imagine immediately I was thinking of like Teletubbies and what's that dinosaur purple? What's that purple?
Barney,
dinosaur? Barney and Friends.
Yeah, I mean, it's really gonna be like that. Everyone's nice to each other. There's no ulterior motive. Everyone's always honest, patient with each other. That and eventually all that will translate into the economy, right? And then like things will be like priced more fairly. People are not gonna cutthroat us for discount from hawkers or like whatever. And some things will be priced like more fairly. And yeah, there's you won't see things like poverty or like Africa. That's just how, like, if abundance is about helping each other out, right? Then like the countries will help each other out right off the bat. Yeah, that's how I would think about it.
The way that I would like to answer this question is the way that Warren Buffett has succinctly give a very good analogy in. So imagine you have the decision to be, basically before you're born into this world, right? You have the ability to be born in, you have the ability to design a world to the best of your ability. It means before you're born, right, you can design the world, right? No matter, but the only thing that you cannot do is to pick which family you're born in. But you have ability to design the world. So what kind of world you want, you can design yourself. But the catch is you cannot choose which family
you're born in. You have no ability to choose which country you're born in. You cannot choose whether you're male, you're female. You cannot choose whether you're an alien. You cannot do any of that, right? And I think the way that he answered is very good. And that is, he says that if you want to design a world like that, right, what you will really end up, if you really sit down and think about it, is that you want to answer it, right? Where you want a world, right, to be able to allow the person, no matter where he's from, to maximize his potential in life. And that is to draw out the maximum potential that he can achieve in his life. No matter whether or not is he black, is he white, is he Asian, is he alien, doesn't matter, so long as he's able to maximize and being what he's good at. Whether or not you're an artist, you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, you're an accountant, doesn't matter. Just maximize the potential. And I think that's a very good answer to like what is an ideal world. And the ideal world, in a world where there is abundance, I would say that the world has a place for everyone. And then I would say that most people will find a place to provide value to people around them, right? So I think that is how I see the economy looking at, meaning it will not be a world like Parasite. I think the best way to illustrate this particular effect in a negative light, right, is you go and watch the Korean movie called Parasite, where you realize, right, the deeper meaning, right, this director did a brilliant job, is the question of who is the parasite in that movie, right? Because although from superficial level, right, when you watch the movie, you would think that the person infiltrating the rich people are the parasites, right? Towards the end of the movie, when you see these people who are living in La La Land, when people are getting their houses flooded in the district, right, you realize that the people who are like super wealthy are essentially getting their lives subsidized heavily by the people who are suffering in the streets. And in a way, they are also parasites. So it's a very philosophical question when you watch that movie. Then the more times you watch it, the more times you realize that it is sort of like a a cause and effect thing, right? So I think end of the day, if you, the way I see it is that now that I've been around APEC, right, I am a lot intensely more grateful for the honest hawkers on the ground, because in a way I also understand that they are also subsidizing the low cost of living for people who are earning first world incomes. If you think about it, right, they are sacrificing their blood, sweat and tears to subsidize your livelihood, because they have to suffer so much to earn that dollar, right? So that is something which in an ideal world of abundance, they don't have to do that, right? So I think that end of the day, the ideal abundance world, I would say, is that people who have made it are people who are very generous.
Yes.
Because they don't feel the need to keep. They feel the need to share it, right? I know this sounds borderline like communism, but it's not. It's a different type of.
No, I promise it's different.
I know this sounds like borderline communism, okay, but there's a difference between forced communism and voluntary communism. All right.
Yeah, the key is voluntary. The key
is voluntary, and that is people who are wealthy. The way that they get wealthy is not because they're driven by scarcity, but they're driven by abundance, and they just want to do better for the world. That's it. And when they get there, they become very voluntarily giving.
Yes.
Right, so that's the way that I look at it, right? So I know it's very philosophical, but that's a philosophical question, right? So the next question, I think, is how do you balance between prudency, abundance mindset in our journey to FIRE? I think we sort of already answered that in the questions on how to prevent too much optimism, and that is, I think it's important that you fact check, have key roadmaps along the way, then also make sure that, optimism is not good. It's not a replacement for good personal finance, as Ryan would like to say, right? You can be optimistic about the future, but not to a point where you sacrifice good personal finance habits. End of the day, you still need to have good personal finance habits so that you can achieve the long-term goal of living a life of abundance. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, like if you're not prudent enough to save, then you don't have capital to invest. It's kind of like that, how I see it. But you also want to kind of like save enough for yourself to spend on, so you treat yourself from time to time, and then you don't go like all full on money saving until to the point where you're having this scarcity mindset that hurts other people around you. It's kind of like what we discussed in the last couple hours. It's like FIRE, right? What I usually see is like you need to save well enough so that you have money for yourself, but also your future self. So that the part where you're saving for your future self is that you take the money, you go and invest, and you want to get good at investing. So and then the Chinese saying goes, you roll the money, and then the money rolls and rolls and rolls on. So and then that's where I personally found that earning money is not hard, and then there's like a lot of opportunities out there to actually earn money.
Yep.
And then it's just like a continuous cycle, and then you go back to focus on your career, get a raise, and then you save money better, you up your living standards. So there's like also a very fine line between lifestyle inflation and what do you call this? The lifestyle inflation and being scarce. Like in general, you either do lifestyle inflation, or you spend more in general. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
So it's like sometimes it's okay to spend on a little bit more, move to a better neighborhood so that you get better living conditions, but move to a better place if you're living in the shithole. That's treating yourself right. Fundamentally, you cannot operate on living in a house that you hate. You will be always out spending money instead of staying at home. So you can save money better. In the grand scheme of things, you want to spend mindfully. I guess that's the word I'm trying to find.
Yep, I agree. It's always good to be prudent, but of course, along the way, you also want to do something nice to yourself, also treat yourself better. Because I think end of the day, you always go back to the idea that in the abundance mindset, right, you can always earn more money. And that's something which a lot of personal finance always stems on saving money, but not a lot of them really stem on actually earning. And that's something which personal finance is not good at. If you want to earn more, you cannot come from a perspective of personal finance, because personal finance is everything after sales. You look in the income statement, revenue is the first line. Personal finance is everything after revenue. But if you want to get good at generating revenue, you cannot be reading personal finance book. You need to be reading business books. You need to be reading business biographies, autobiographies of people who do business. You need to be reading, the 4 quadrants that Robert Kiyosaki is very good at, right? The 4 quadrants. You need to be reading in the investor and also the business person quadrant.
Yes.
These are the 2 quadrants you need to get good at. Then you can start to shift in personal finance, right? You cannot personally finance your way to be a high income earner, right? Because end of the day, that distills back to your earning power. So I find that a lot of people, it's not bad to be good in personal finance, but I think you can do a lot more by growing your income.
Put it this way, I would say good personal finance habits, right? It will take you above a certain threshold, but then and it will improve your life to a certain extent. But if you want to go further, then you will need to start to learn how to make more money. That's and then when you make more money, you want to upgrade your life again. Then you have to go back and look at your personal finance, whether you're overspending or not, and then it's like a continuous cycle between scarcity and abundance, I would say.
Yeah. And also give yourself 5 years.
Yeah, don't rush it. Don't rush it.
I think a lot of people have a very unrealistic expectation, that they need to do this within 1 or 2 years.
Or hit 1 million before they're 30. Yeah. I used to think like that,
Yeah.
But
it can be done. It can be done. The thing is that you sacrifice a lot, but I always think that it's also good to be patient with yourself, and not let your self-worth be dictated by validation from external factors,
Yeah.
Right? Hitting that $1 million does not mean that you have no problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Some people who are higher income earners, they have other problems like family problems, depression from overwork and all that. Health problems sometimes.
Different type of problem, right? Definitely health is definitely one of them. So I would say that having a good balance. End of the day, just be accountable to yourself, right? You need to have a good balance, right? So I always feel that the best way to balance that is come back to facts, and also always measure your happiness level. I feel that it's very important, because if you go back and ask yourself whether or not you're happy, right? And if every single day, you answer no, then something need to change, Something needs to give. Then maybe you might want to relook in your own life, and then reassess. I always like to give myself a quarterly review of my life every quarter. In 1 year, you always have the thank you filing by the company, right? Where they relook their quarter. I always like to do that on myself. Every quarter, I always look at my life, right? Then I ask myself, did I achieve much in the last quarter? It doesn't need to be financial. It can be personal, can be health, can be mental. And if too many quarters go by, right, where it feels like shit, right, then maybe I need to tell myself, I need
to make a change.
I need to make a change. Yeah. So, and there's never a single time where I decide to actually make a change where my life didn't get better. It has always gotten better. So I think the difficult part is to push yourself to make that change. That's the tough part. The moment you make that change and decide to do something, then actually the rest of it, right, will come naturally, right? This is really like habitual. If you want to read more on that, you can try Atomic Habits. I think that's a pretty good book.
Yeah.
Starting a good habit, right? So that's some of it. So hopefully that has helped. So the next question is there a relation between a person's financial status to their mindset? Whether it's abundance, lack of risk taking, play safe, too greedy. Do you think it's related? Like, is there a relation between a personal finance to the status to mindset? I think the one who actually answered this very well is Azan and Sher, right? If you don't know who is that, they actually have an Instagram tag. It's this fantastic couple who post on personal finance content. Azan and Sher posted a very good post on their Twitter, I think last week, right? Saying that in the long run, your financial mindset will equate to your financial status.
Oh, was it net worth to be specific? Yeah.
Yeah, your net worth. I think your net worth in the long run will trend towards your financial status.
Yes,
your
100%.
financial mindset. Because
100%.
The best way they can give it, right, is like saying, if, for example, if you are a lottery winner, you win millions of dollars. But if you are not ready, financially, mentally ready for that money, right, eventually the money will disappear.
You spend it all away.
Yeah, they'll spend it all away. They don't know how to invest. They don't know how to keep. They don't know how to budget. They don't know how to do personal finance. Eventually, it'll be gone. So I think this is a very good example to answer this question, right? Is there a relation? The answer is yes, because I think in the journey to become like so-called FIRE or super wealthy, people go through many phases, and I've seen these phases many a times, where people when the first difficult thing is to achieve financial security, right? Financial security is not super difficult to achieve. I think most people can get it within 5 years. Right?
You can save your way there, lah.
You can save your way there. The difficult part, right, is financial freedom. Financial security to financial freedom, that is the first stumbling block. Most people find it very difficult to achieve, because in order for you to reach financial freedom versus financial security, you cannot play it safe. You need to take risks.
It's kind of like businesses, right? Like the hard part is scaling. It's always like scaling. So like in terms of this financial security to financial freedom, it's about scaling your net worth to the point that you don't feel like you need to you feel safe in a way,
Yes. And
so the hard part is like going through that scaling process.
Yeah, because you see, when you reach financial security, you can do that by playing safe. You can do that with very low risk.
You just need to stop being stupid and like maybe go gamble or stop partying and save money. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's not difficult to hit financial security, but to hit financial freedom, as you said, the difficult part is to scale, and that requires a different type of skill set that cannot stem from personal finance. Because if you decide to do financial freedom through personal finance, you are paying the cost through time, because it takes you 25 years to get it. 25, exactly. 30, 35 years. It takes a very long time for you to get it. To achieve financial security, financial freedom in the shortest amount of time, you need to take very calculated, very decisive, and very due diligence actions, right, that will get you there. And that is the part where most people cannot do, because they've been trained from a scarcity mindset. Because in order for you to make that jump, you need to be able to tell yourself you can make mistake, all right? And you need to believe in abundance. And that is something which many people cannot do, all right? So that is the second stage. Assuming, let's say, you are superstar, you achieve financial freedom. The third stage, all right, which I find that most people also have a mental block, and that is to go from financial freedom to be wealthy. That is also another stumbling block I find most people cannot jump, and that is even harder to do. Why? Because the moment a person reaches financial freedom, right, it is very difficult for them to mentally, right, go through another skill up, because they are so afraid to lose the financial freedom. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? Because the moment you achieve financial freedom, you're already wealthy. You don't have to work already. Right? So there's two ways to go about it. Either you protect your financial freedom, or you become super wealthy. The part where most people find it very difficult is that once they become financially free, they don't want to risk that freedom to be super wealthy.
Because then essentially what I noticed the trend, right? People who are financially free, they basically turn into paranoid people.
And then they hoard cash.
Yeah, they hoard cash. They think everything is going to crash. They think everything is going to die. Right? They
This
think
is
that
the
the
most
company is
annoying
going to
kind.
change. And this is very annoying. Why? Because these people they know that they don't need to work. They know they are financially free, but because they are financially free, they're so afraid to lose it. Right? That they basically become cheapskate. Right, they then essentially they went from like, they first believed in abundance, and then the moment they got there, right, then they suddenly went back to scarcity again.
That's funny, yeah.
Right, so it's a bit ironic lah, and I've seen it happen so many times in financial guru, I don't want to say who, right? I've seen it happen so many times in my personal finance career, right? I do consultation. I've seen many people who go through this phase. Financial security is easy. Financial freedom is difficult. But once they go financial freedom, you tell them, do you want to be very wealthy? They cannot pull the trigger. They because they're scared, right?
I would say like, don't forget how you started it in a way. Does that make sense? It's like you move from like financial security to freedom, right? Remember that feeling, what it took to actually get there, because you had to risk, when you had like nothing to your name, you had to risk it all. And then it's
not super difficult to take that step, I would say, because it's you know that you can always achieve financial security again.
Yes.
Right.
You as long as you have the fundamentals, right, you can always re-perform that net worth growth. It's not by luck, if that makes sense. It's something that's engineered, that you can actually take calculated steps to actually achieve.
Yeah. And I think this answers the question I think that this person is really trying to ask. Because when you look at people who are wealthy and people who are financially free and people who are super wealthy, right, you realize that there are different shades of wealth. There are the people who are financially secure, people who are financially free, and people who are very wealthy. They don't have to, people who have generational wealth. And the difference between the people who are generational wealth and people who are financially free in just their own life, right, is that the people who have generational wealth tend to be people who the difference is not really like execution. The difference is mindset. That's really the difference. The mentality that they have is that the people who are financially free, what really stops them from being generationally rich, right, is that they have that fear of losing their freedom. And ironically, that fear itself causes them, right, to stop growing.
Yeah, to grow, you have to be fearless. Let's just put it that way.
That's why they say fortune favors the bold.
Indeed.
Yeah. So I think like I hope this like really sums it up, because I think I mean, I've been in this game long enough to know that these are the phases that people go through, and essentially it always goes back to like end of the day, money is one thing, but I think if you're able to live your life by not flagellating yourself to like consumerism, then I think that most of the time people will live life quite happily lah. It's just that if you want to get out of the rat race, right, then usually it requires yourself to step out of the comfort zone, which most people cannot do. And you also realize that people who are financially free, they also, you'll be surprised that a lot of them, right, are also very afraid to step out of their comfort zone because they're already financially free.
Yeah. Now you mentioned that it's kind of like, it reflects itself in investing, really. Like in general, right, if you look at the S&P 500, despite of like World War II, despite of like the 70s, the crash, and 2000, the 1999 crash, 2008, the market always comes back up. If you are patient enough, you're optimistic enough, you hold long enough, you always earn money. And this like Aaron always shares this story about him, pre-COVID, he had a lot of cash. But then in the end of the day, after he went all in after the 2020 crash, right? The alpha that you get is like around 30-40% only, more than the person who's like patiently waiting for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
So but then you share a lot, like the stress that you have from hoarding cash, right, is like insanely high because you don't know when to pull the trigger.
Yep.
But then you don't even know if the crash is gonna come. And you're like a rare case where when the crash came, right, you actually went in. Most people don't, People who hold cash Bitcoin dropped to 20K. Now people are saying the Bitcoin's going to drop to 10K. Another 50% crash. Like, what nonsense is this? Like, and they still say we're going to wait for that huge crash. It's
I
coming.
would say that is, you see, the issue, right, is that it stems from scarcity mindset. You get what I mean? It's like the problem is that when you have financial freedom, it really requires you to, if you want to be like generationally wealthy, the problem is that it requires you to take another step towards imagining abundance of a higher scale. And that is something, right, which I think is very difficult for many people to reach that level, you know, because like mentally you first need to believe it's possible. If you cannot even believe it's possible, it's not going to happen.
Yes.
Right. And then and you also need to think the actions we should take needs to be scalable, right? Which a lot of people seem to forget some certain actions and certain strategies that allow you to go from financially secure to financially free, right? You know, this particular action you can do, it's like, for example, when you go out and work, right, to get from 0 to 10K, you work 5 months, you get it done. But to get from 10K to 100K, you cannot be doing like, if you do it through work, it's going to take you 5 years versus you do something else. Get what I mean? Then if you achieve, like, let's say financial security, you get 100K. You want to go from 100K, let's say you want to 2.5 million, right? You cannot be working like 500 years of your life to get there, right? You need to do something different. Because the law of large numbers don't allow you to scale your manpower.
Yeah, exactly. You cannot scale your time. You only have 24 hours a day.
Precisely. You cannot scale your time. So you need to be able to delegate your scale of wealth to somewhere else, and that usually comes in a span of either building a business or either investing your money. And even in the realm of investing money, if you have managed to get from financial security to financial freedom through option play, let's say you do option, you're very successful. If your net worth is, let's say, $3 million, you think you can grow from 2 million to 30 million using options? That is something you need to ask yourself. You know, you go and do the numbers. Just take out a piece of Excel sheet, right, and go and calculate your option player, and then tell me in the face you can earn $30 million in 5 years, right, through options. I don't think so. Because
how do I put it?
If even Adam Cole himself, who teaches option course, cannot even do that, right?
If he can do that, he wouldn't be selling courses like this.
Yeah, that's my point. So if even Adam Cole, who sells courses, can't do it through options, right, I don't think the majority of people can do it. Because because the way to get to that next level, let's say you already hit you want to get 30 million, you cannot be doing physical work. You need to be thinking like a business person. And how do you scale from 2.5 to 30 million? Because
and you need to
12 and a half times. So the market size, the plays that you do needs to be big enough for you to make that money.
And like going back to the point where you said like we cannot scale time, right? You have to put this scaling on autopilot, because you only have so much time. You know, you still need to go to work. You still need to come back and do your chores and whatnot. You know, and then you only have 24 hours. You still need to sleep.
Yep.
And that's why you need to learn how to put this money growing activity on autopilot. You have to create a system to automate it.
And this includes investment ventures in real estate. It includes investment ventures like value investing. You honestly think Warren Buffett can be a multi-billionaire doing value investing?
Imagine the number of trades he have to execute.
The market is not even big enough for him to do that. Yeah. Right, the best performing hedge fund that does the best performing hedge fund is Renaissance Technologies. I wrote an article and book about that. You can read it.
It was a good book though.
Yeah, it's a good book. But the maximum market cap they can only achieve is 10 billion. After 10 billion, they cannot take any more money because the market is
kick clients already.
Out. Yeah, they have to kick clients out. So their 10 billion is not really scaling. They cannot scale, right? So like if you ask yourself, you want to scale, like that's why I say that particular jump from like financial freedom to be like generational wealth, the way that you think about things, right, needs to be completely different from the way that you get from financial security to financial freedom. And the way that you do things cannot be the same. It will only sustain your lifestyle, right? But if you want to make that leap, then you need to do things that are different. And that means putting yourself in a place where you feel uncomfortable. Because that's the only way you're going to grow.
Exactly. This is where like people will start saying like, when you go into like all this radical scaling methods, right? people will start saying you're crazy, and you will feel like the whole world's against you, because like there's only 1% of people who actually made it to the super wealthy group. Well, I'm not there yet, of course. I just barely achieved like financial security. I can't even say I have financial freedom yet. But like in the grand scheme of things, right, you have to be like patient enough, and like you have to believe in like abundance enough. Like there's like no lack of opportunity to actually make money.
Yeah, so like I think this is a very good question, because it really stems from the whole crux of this episode, right? Which is like mindset, right? Because the wealthy people, I've seen all shits. I've seen people who believe in abundance. I've seen people who've been stuck at financial freedom for so long that they play safe, they become paranoid, and they become crazy. They think the whole world is going to go. They always, that's my biggest fear, right? My biggest fear is like after financial freedom, I become a bitter old man who believes that the entire world is going to crash. So I stay at home and just, basically collect gold and silver.
Oh no, that sounds like Robert Kiyosaki.
I don't want to say who lah, but I find that has been like the what you call that? That has been like the common narrative that I see, and that is they don't want to believe that the world has a lot of abundance, right?
They don't believe the world can improve.
Yeah, which is quite ridiculous lah. Because if you read history far enough, you realize that there's no limit to human potential, right? Really, there's no limit. We've come so far in the last like 2 years, let alone what's going to happen in the next 20 years. So I think it's very important that you become very optimistic about the future. So people always ask me, Aaron, why you don't invest in real estate? There's a reason why. Because I'm optimistic about the next 10 and 20 years. I don't see my optimism being rewarded in real estate, because I think when you go back to the fundamentals of real estate, it's essentially a business that is providing a roof over your head. And the way that I see it in the next 20 years is that it's going to be very efficient, because I think the alpha from store of value is going to be eaten up by crypto.
Yes.
Right? That's the way I see it. That's why I invest inside crypto lah, because I see that I think this problem is going to solve. Because real estate, the problem is that the amount of money you need to go inside to keep your property, the cutoff is so high, right? No, and it's not international. Like you have this property here, this property there. So like that's the way I see the world lah. But obviously, I might be wrong, but it's fine, because I spread myself with enough ideas where even if I'm wrong, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
But basically, this is the step that I take, because I don't want to be stuck as a bitter old man who's so paranoid that the whole world is going to end. Right?
Astro is coming.
I see that enough. Okay, like around APEC, I see a lot of people who are retired. That's basically their end game. Right, they are in their 40s, they probably like sold a business, they're super wealthy, and for some reason, even though with all their money, they're very bitter. So that's my worst nightmare. I don't want to go there. So I try to keep myself open as much as I can. I try to see the world from a lens of opportunity and abundance, because you see, this is what separates the people with abundance and scarcity. When there is a problem in life, you either see it as an opportunity or a problem, right? And I would very much prefer to see life as a never-ending slew of opportunities than problems, because when there is a problem and you can solve it, that is a business idea right there.
Yeah, basically glass half full or half empty.
Yeah. So is there any actually that's the last questions that we got. Do you have any other questions for yourself, Ryan?
Actually, no, I think we've touched on like everything that's on abundance from like and scarcity from a lot of different aspects. I think it was a pretty holistic episode that we've done today, because all in all, right, the right mindset eventually is like a upwards or downward spiral. It will go and touch all parts of your life: relationships, money, and investments, your career. It's just that because we are in like the personal finance community, the investing community, right? And the topics of like abundance and scarcity hits home, because it's about money, and this is where like the root of like a lot of problems will come from. Not to say money is a problem. Not having money to solve things is a problem, because like fundamentally, I believe like if the problem is a problem where you can solve with money, then the problem becomes how can you source the money, and that's where like a lot of people cannot solve the problem lah.
Yep.
The real problems are the problems that you cannot solve with money, like relationships and careers, all that. So yeah, it has been a really holistic episode.
Yep. We hope that you guys enjoy it because it's something different from our usual like investment content. So I think it's good to take a break once in a while and just focus on topics like this. Give us a break from that and stuff like that. So I think that's pretty much wraps up our end of this episode. Before we end, Ryan, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I would say in terms of like abundance and scarcity, it's always good to have like a nice balance between them. If you want to cultivate like a abundance mindset, right? Like for people who are in a similar situation as me, where we grew up in scarcity, you could try reading books by Ryan Holiday, which focuses on like stoicism. I think they're pretty well translated and also like translated in the sense from like the actual writings to his own interpretation on modern day living, and also the Courage to Be Like series. And also, like, if you want to delve a little bit deeper, you can try reading the actual writings from on stoicism. Like, a few comes to mind. I can't remember the names because like Socrates and like Epictetus, all that. And also like for Buddhism, you can try some of the famous Zen Buddhism books or the actual writings. But yeah, Steve Jobs also dabble a little bit in like Buddhism, Zen Buddhism. That's why he came back and created Apple to be the beast he is today. So yeah.
Yeah. So as you know, guys, we definitely enjoy doing episodes like this. So well, I think that's the end of our episode for this. We hope you enjoyed it. And we're both on Instagram. Ryan, he changed his handle. So if you want to follow him, remember it's Foots and Stongs. All right. So you'll follow him there. For me, it's at Aaron Goes Global. And we'll see you again in the next episode.